So friends, welcome. What if Naruto was when Spider-Man vs. Naruto x Gwen S x Peni x Mary Jane movie. Naruto was enjoying a dream. He immediately forgot the moment he was awakened by hushed giggles, feeling very warm and very comfortable wrapped up in his sheets. He gave no mind to the noise, opting instead to fall back to sleep, hoping to continue whatever it was he was dreaming of earlier. He almost achieved this until there was a faint flash followed closely by even louder giggles that sounded awfully familiar. "Mom. Water." Naruto began, his words slurred and raspy from having just been woken up. He cracked open an eye just in time to be blinded by yet another flash, washing away his drowsiness immediately. "Mom, I told you not to take pictures of me while I sleep." Standing at the foot of his bed was the outline of his mother, obscured by the light coming from the hallway. He fumbled with his wristwatch as he was assaulted by quick flashes like a strobe, trying to find the application to turn on his bedroom lights. Once his eyes finally adjusted to the light, he was greeted with the sight of his mother smiling both mischievously and somehow triumphantly from behind her phone. Her eyes, a dark shade of violet, shined with mirth. Vibrant red hair tied in a tail which hung over her left shoulder, held together by a single orange hairband. She was wearing her favorite green dress that morning. "But how else am I supposed to remember my baby boy's second week of school?" Kushina asked, turning her phone to show him the last picture she'd taken. "Mom." Naruto groaned in embarrassment. In the picture one of his eyes was shut and his hair was a tangled mess as he reached for the camera. It wasn't exactly a flattering image. "Just remember it like normal people. Or at least wait until I am up. You nearly blinded me." "It's all about capturing memories," Kushina cheered, raising her phone to take more pictures. "Get out!" Naruto shouted, throwing his pillow at her. His mother aptly dodged the first pillow easily, running out of the room to escape the volley of pillows he was lobbing at her. Giggling all the while still tired, Naruto knew he wouldn't be able to sleep any further, so with great reluctance, he dragged himself out of bed. After getting dressed, he joined his mother for breakfast. He grumpily began to eat his food, while glancing at his mother, smiling. The picture of innocence. She even hummed a sweet tune as she enjoyed her own meal, behaving as though she had done nothing wrong. "Can you please pass me the syrup?" Kushina asked kindly. "Can you stop taking pictures of me while I sleep?" Naruto retorted while holding the syrup hostage. "It's not normal." "No," Kushina answered immediately and with absolutely no hesitation, "and besides, I only take pictures of important occasions. Now gimme." She motioned with her hands. "Like my second week of school?" Naruto asked with a sigh, passing his mother the syrup bottle, grimacing as she proceeded to nearly empty the bottle on her pancakes. "Exactly," Kushina agreed, taking a triumphant bite of her syrupy monstrosity. "Mom, don't you think that's going a little overboard?" Naruto asked, hoping for once to get his point across to his mother, while knowing it was a moot point. "There's nothing special about the second week of school." "Not in the slightest. You're going to Vision, one of the most prestigious schools in New York. I am immensely proud of you and I know your father would be too. That's why I want to commemorate every moment," Kushina said, offering him a genuine smile that immediately made Naruto feel guilty for even complaining, but something else bothered him even more. He looked down to his half-eaten breakfast at the mention of his father. It had only been 3 years since he died, and on certain days, it still didn't feel like it was true. Unfortunately it was, and ever since then his already protective mother had become borderline clingy. She took any and every chance to impose herself into his life. He was 15 and had a curfew of 6 on the evening, was not allowed to roam the city by himself, and was only allowed to have friends over under strict supervision. While Naruto understood his mother's caution, and he loved her very much, he was beginning to grow tired of her overbearing behavior. Her latest display being his abrupt change in school, after an incident at his previous school involving a bully and a beatdown he received. His mother panicked and pulled him from that school, enrolling him in one he wasn't sure they could afford. Sometimes he hated his whisker birthmarks. Naruto wanted nothing more than to return to his old school, where he had friends and even a few girls he was interested in, but there was no arguing with his mother, not when she made up her mind. "Yeah," Naruto muttered. It was all he could think to say in that moment. He saw his mother's expression fall momentarily before returning to her own meal. They ate in relative silence following that exchange, with only the morning news playing from the living room offering a reprieve from the awkwardness. There was a sudden breaking news report mentioning the latest clash between Kingpin and Spider-Man. Naruto perked up at this, as did his mother, but each for their own reasons. Spider-Man, Kushina all but spat, her normally kind and vibrant complexion contorting into something so angry, so foreign from her, just one criminal fighting another. That was what his father often used to say about Spider-Man. Personally, Naruto was a big fan of the masked vigilante, although he understood why his mother wasn't. His father's death was no accident and somehow Spider-Man was involved, though he was certain it wasn't the hero's fault, for as amazing as Spider-Man was, he couldn't save everyone. Unfortunately, his father was among those unlucky. That's what Naruto chose to believe. I should probably get going soon if I want to get to Vision with enough time to drop off my stuff, Naruto said, standing. Do you want a ride to school? Kushina asked. Do I have a choice? Naruto asked rhetorically and with a sigh. Kushina already had her keys in hand, shaking them. Nope. She sang the single word, popping the P. It was early in the morning but New York was never a city to sleep so traffic was already bustling, horns were blaring, commingling with singing birds and colorful curse words being exchanged in the distance as they stopped at a red light, waiting for what felt like minutes for it to finally change. So, how are things going at Vision? Kushina asked conversationally. Fine, Naruto said, staring out the window to a virtual billboard advertising Spider-Man's latest business venture, a chain of Spider-Man-themed restaurants. Just fine? Have you made any new friends, maybe a few of the female variety? Kushina asked with a teasing tone. No, Naruto answered with a roll of his eyes. Even if there were, he wouldn't introduce any to his mother, at least not until the week after the wedding. Even then, knowing his mother, she might scare them away, still just Miles. Good, Kushina said with a nod, my baby's too young to be entangled by some hussy. Mom, no one talks like that, Naruto said, fogging the window with a sigh. He tried to draw a star in the condensate but the design ended up looking like poorly connected triangles, so he settled on a spiral. They finally arrived at Vision, the massive boarding school encompassing 2 entire city blocks. There was a long line of luxurious cars dropping off students, most piloted by private drivers in uniform. There was a rather sizable crowd amassed outside of the school, chatting amongst themselves in groups, some cliché cliques while others more diverse. Here's fine, Naruto said as he unlicked the doors in an attempt at an early escape, but before he was able to open the door, his mother locked it again, doing so the 3 other times he tried. Don't worry, I don't mind dropping you off closer, Kushina said. Naruto chose to accept his fate knowing short of jumping out of the moving car, there was nothing he could do to avoid the coming embarrassment as they approached the front of the line. Have a great day at school. Kushina called after him through the opened window. I'll see you Friday, and don't forget to call me my little fox. Her call punctuated the wet kiss on the cheek shed given him on the cheek before allowing him out of the car. Some of the students had seen it and were already in the process of mocking him when she rolled down the window to ruin any chances of making any friends. Naruto smiled tersely and waved back at her, solely for his mother's sake. Once she was out of sight he dropped his hand and threw on his hood to hide himself, trying his best to ignore the jeers that followed him from those around. Nice mom you got there, Foxy. Naruto turned to see who'd spoken to him and felt himself fluster deeply at who it was. Seated on the concrete railing leading up the stairs was a very beautiful girl. She was tall with wavy shoulder-length platinum blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a silver piercing above her right eye. She wore the gray Vision school uniform like everyone else, but there was an undeniable confidence about her, along with the air of rebalance. The total opposite of who he was. After composing himself he made a quick dash to his dorm to drop off his suitcase before classes began. The room was currently empty, save for the Spider-Man posters on the walls and a few scattered articles of clothing from his roommate, a boy named Miles Morales, a fellow fan of the masked hero and his sole friend at Vision. Looks like Miles late again, Naruto said to himself, tossing his things on the bottom bunk, his bunk, before making his way to his first class. The day dragged on and it wasn't until the break before his final class that he met with Miles. Hola, Naruto, Miles greeted him in Spanish, sounding much like the correct Japanese pronunciation of his name, something not even his mother did. Miles was 2 years younger than him at 13, with short black hair styled into an afro. His eyes were brown and always wide in wonder's fellow fish out of water. From what he learned from his friend, he was also an unwilling attendee at Vision boarding school. Hola, Miles, Naruto returned the bilingual greeting. He offered his friend his fist, as it was his preferred method of greetings beyond words. Miles, who was currently struggling with a large stack of books in his hands, smiled sheepishly and shrugged. Naruto laughed and bumped his fist regardless. Looks like you've got your hands full there, need any help? I am good, Miles said, obviously trying to play off the fact he was struggling with his books. Just gotta drop some of these off in my locker before our next class. Well, you'd better get going then, we've only got like 3 minutes before the bell rings, Naruto said, glancing at his watch. You sure you don't need any help? Nah, I got this. Just make sure to save me a seat, yeah? Miles said. Will do, Naruto said, watching his friend scurry away through the crowded halls, almost tripping over his untied shoelaces. He arrived to his final class of the day, science with Mrs. Corella. As Naruto made his way to his desk, he noticed the girl who mocked him earlier that morning. Sitting in his seat, while Mrs. Corella didn't exactly believe in assigned seating, the class had established their own semblance of a seating chart that seldom changed. With that, he froze, unsure of what to do next. Class was about to begin and there were only 2 seats left, one to the right of the girl, where Miles usually sat, and one in the back next to a kid who liked to poke people with the sharp end of his pencil. Naruto didn't want to sit next to that kid and neither did he want Miles to, so, gathering what little courage he could muster, he approached the girl. He cleared his throat when his voice broke, you're kinda in my seat. The girl looked up from her phone to smirk at him, so? He stammered, having no retort come to mind in regarding the beautiful girl. Is there a problem, Mr. Namikaze? Mrs. Corella asked with arms crossed and a face set in a deadpan. He looked back to the girl, who was now resting her chin in the palm of her hand, smirking up at him. Her bright blues regarded him, the corner of her eyes wrinkling with mischief, as if she were silently challenging him to say something. No, Naruto relented. Then take a seat, Mrs. Corella said. We're watching a video today and I don't think your back makes for a good screen. Hearing people begin to laugh, Naruto felt his resolve waver quickly. Sorry Miles, he muttered under his breath, electing to take his seat next to the blonde. So, who's Miles? She asked. Naruto had not been expecting the question, or for her to speak further, for that matter. In fact, he had whispered the words so low he was surprised Shed heard him. A friend, Naruto answered promptly, staring forward as the lecture began. Neato, name's Gwendolyn, by the way, she introduced herself, her smirk lessening into a genuine smile. Gwendolyn Stacy, but I go by Gwen because that's way too many syllables. Naruto almost smiled and almost laughed at that, but didn't respond otherwise because he simply didn't know what to say. He was not used to girls talking to him, least of all beautiful girls had just met. Thinking on it more clearly, he hadn't actually seen Gwen before that morning. You know, Foxy, when someone offers you their name, you're supposed to offer yours too, she continued. Naruto glanced at her and felt himself fluster again seeing her undivided attention was on him. He quickly looked forward again, watching as Mrs. Corella began to set up the projector. Naruto Namikaze, Gwen repeated, humming. Cool name. I like it, she said, finally turning her attention forward. Despite himself and her behavior towards him thus far, Naruto smiled again. But I am gonna keep calling you Foxy. Just like that, his smile fell away. Miles arrived 10 minutes into class, much to the chagrin of Mrs. Corella. Naruto could only offer his friend his silent condolences and apologies as he walked by, staring between himself and Gwen. I tried, Naruto whispered. Not really, Gwen said, nonchalantly elongating the first word. He actually caved in pretty much right away, and all I had to do was bat my eyes at him, she said, teasingly fluttering her eyes at Naruto to prove her point. Miles shot a red-faced Naruto one final look of betrayal before trudging off to the back of the room. Naruto narrowed his eyes at her, while she only smirked in response. I take it that's Miles? Gwen said, but Naruto didn't answer. He did, however, flinch hearing Miles yelp from the back of the classroom. He wasn't able to apologize to his friend after class because Mrs. Corella requested Miles stay behind to speak with him. Judging by her tone, he was in some form of trouble but with little else to do. Naruto returned to their shared dorm to do his homework while he waited for him. He shrugged off his backpack upon entering the room and shut the door behind him with his foot. His phone began to ring and Naruto didn't have to look at his phone to know it was his mother calling him. no one else ever called him and his mother knew exactly when his last class ended. Meet any girls today? Kushina asked with no preamble. Naruto almost shivered at his mother's freighting insight, wondering briefly if she had powers of the mind. No mom, I didn't, just another boring day, he said. He didn't consider it prudent mentioning Gwen considering she'd little else but tease him. Well, that's good to hear. I was just calling to check in on my sweet baby boy, Kushina said. Mom, I am not a kid anymore, Naruto said, exasperated. The door abruptly swung open and a very irritated Miles stormed in. What the hell, man? I told you to save me a seat. Ooh, is that Miles I hear? Kushina asked. Hola, Miles. He didn't have his phone on speaker and yet, his mother's voice somehow seemed to broadcast loud enough for his friend to hear. Oh, is that your mom on the phone? Miles asked with a teasing grin. Hola, Mrs. Namikaze. All right mom, gotta go. Naruto quickly made to hang up the phone but was unable to do so before his mother got in a few final words. Don't stay up too late and don't forget to call me, love you. He hung up and threw his phone to the side, falling back into his bed with a sigh. Ah, does Naruto's mommy miss him? Miles mocked. Shut up, Naruto rolled his eyes. Don't think I didn't hear what happened this morning. Fair enough. Miles groaned, tossing his own book bag onto the floor next to Naruto's. He took a seat at their shared desk in front of the computer. Man, today sucked, on top of being stabbed. Thanks for that by the way, Mrs. Corella's making me write a personal essay about what kind of person I want to be. I mean, what kind of subject is that anyway? And what am I supposed to say? I want to be a firefighter? An astronaut? Spider-Man? Makes me feel like I am in middle school all over again? What do you want to be when you grow up? Naruto laughed, only to realize then he didn't know the answer to that question either. When he was young he wanted to be a ninja of all things, but that seems so long ago now. So dumb, Miles groaned. I am guessing you tried to fail again, didn't you? Naruto surmised. Yeah, probably shoulda gotten at least a few answers right, Miles muttered. They fell into a momentary lull in conversation. The sounds of the city coming through the opened window. A couple of rooms down someone was playing some music but only the deep rhythmic thrums of the bass could be heard. So, that girl was pretty hot, Miles said. Naruto's eyes were closed but he could hear the grin in his friend's inflection, indicating he was no longer mad at him. At this, he smiled too. Yeah, she was. After another long day, hours of homework, and having been rudely awakened that morning, Naruto decided to take a quick nap. He woke up to find Miles now dressed in his street clothes, a backpack tossed over his shoulder. Going somewhere? Naruto asked through a yawn. They had a strict curfew at Vision. They weren't allowed to leave after a certain time, with the exception of visiting the library or computer lab, and Naruto suspected Miles wasn't going to either. Yeah, gonna go see my uncle. Wanna tag along? Miles offered. He did, very much so, because he was tired of being cooped up either at school or at home. It had been too long since he'd gone out to do anything fun that didn't involve his mother, but he knew she wouldn't approve. I don't know, it's a school night and it's already past curfew. Dude, don't be such a square. Who's gonna know if we go out? Miles asked. Come on, Naruto, my uncle's a cool dude, live a little. I don't know, Naruto trailed off. I gotta admit, I am a little disappointed in you, man. And here I thought you were cool, Miles said with an over-exaggerated sigh and a disappointed shake of his head. I am cool, Naruto said, sitting up. Are you? Because you're not acting very cool right now, Miles chided. Let's go, Naruto said, throwing on his favorite orange hoodie. That's what I am talking about, Miles cheered. That's how Naruto found himself following Miles into an upscale apartment. Outside of it, anyway, on the fire escape 4 out of 8 stories high. Oh shit, we're really high up, Naruto said, pressing his back up against the wall. Had made the mistake of looking down. Come on man, don't tell me you're scared of heights? Miles asked with a smirk. Yeah. This walkway is rusted to shit and if we fall, we'll totally die. I think that's a pretty justifiable reason to be weary of heights, Naruto said, placing heavy emphasis on the word. You wimp, Miles laughed as he approached a window, but don't worry, this is his apartment. Look, there he is. Watch this. Naruto looked into the window, seeing a man seated on his couch, his face dimly illuminated by the light of his phone. He heard a familiar click beside him and turned to see Miles taking a picture of the man. "I am sending this to him," Miles said. After a few moments the man brought the screen closer to his face before laughing inaudibly with a shake of his head. Standing, Miles had his face pressed up against the glass, making funny faces into it as he approached. "Hey there, nephew." The tall, bald man greeted Miles. His focus immediately shifted to Naruto, his expression growing suspicious. "Who's this now?" "Hey, Uncle Aaron. This is Naruto." Miles introduced him with a nod of his head. "He's my roommate at Vision. Don't worry, he's cool." Naruto certainly didn't feel very cool beneath the mon's scrutiny. He was about to wave but decided that in itself probably wouldn't be very cool, opting only to nod with his hands in the pocket of his hoodie with a serious expression, though he wasn't sure why. For a brief moment, Naruto thought the man made an odd face, but it very well could have been a trick of the light. The train passed in the distance, briefly obscuring the glow of a nearby billboard, and by that extension, Aaron. "Well shit guys, come in." Aaron beckoned them in with a welcoming smile. "Name's Aaron, by the way. Miles told me a little about you." Naruto accepted the mon's outstretched hand, returning his firm handshake with what he hoped was one of his own. "Naruto, and Miles told me about you too. Said you were the coolest uncle ever." "Dude." Miles groaned in embarrassment. "Has he now?" Aaron chuckles. "Well thank you, nephew." Soon they fell into natural conversation, and the more time Naruto spent around Aaron, the more he was beginning to believe Miles' praise of his uncle. He was the complete opposite of what he was used to with his mother, and it was certainly a refreshing change of pace. He played video games with them, openly cursed, and spoke to them as if they were adults. Most importantly of all, he made him feel welcomed, as though they were lifelong friends despite only just having met. "So, how are things going at that preppy school?" Aaron asked as he watched them fight in an intense match that had both Naruto and Miles sitting on the edge of their seats, the buttons of their controllers clacking loudly. "Shit." Miles lost and set his controller down, glaring at a smug Naruto briefly before answering his uncle. "It's so boring. We spent this whole afternoon doing homework and we still didn't even finish. When are we supposed to sleep? It also doesn't help that everyone is so stuck up, well except for Naruto here, but I really wish I could go back to my old school." "Ditto," Naruto agreed. "Come on guys, it can't be all that bad," Aaron said, backhanding his nephew's shoulder. "Think about it, smart girls are where it's at. There has to be someone you're interested in." Miles trudged over to a nearby punching bag hanging from the ceiling. "Nah, nothing like that, at least not yet," he said while taking a few sloppy swings. "I expected more from you, nephew," Aaron said with a grin and a shake of his head, indicating he was only joking. "What about you, Blondie? Can't have no nephew of mine hanging around with a square." "What's wrong with a square?" Naruto asked, indignantly tossing his controller on the couch. "It's a perfectly rational shape." Both uncle and nephew stared at him with brows pitched, looking very much related in that moment. "Dude, I vouched for you," Miles said with a shake of his head. "Ah," Naruto panicked, clearing his throat needlessly. "Well, there's this one new girl. Tall, blonde, cute, she's actually in our science class." "You mean the girl you gave my seat to?" Miles asked in an accusatory tone. Whoa, whoa, man, you left my nephew high and dry over a girl? Not cool. Haven't you ever heard of bros before hoes? Aaron shook his head, though he immediately grinned at him. That is unless she's really good looking. Are you serious right now, Uncle Aaron? Miles questioned. I had to sit next to Stuart. Stuart stabs people? Was she good looking? Aaron asked, ignoring his nephew's complaints. She's really hot, Naruto admitted under the pressure of the mon's prerequisite for betraying a friend. Aaron hummed while rubbing his chin thoughtfully. I'll allow it. You'll allow it? Miles repeated incredulously. I am the one that got stabbed. You'll be fine. Aaron waved him off. Besides, getting stabbed builds character, but now I gotta know, are either of you guys familiar with the shoulder touch? The shoulder touch? No, Naruto admitted. Of course I know about it, Miles boasted, grinning nervously, but, you should probably tell Naruto here since he doesn't. Aaron chuckled and turned to regard Naruto. Alright, it goes like this, next time you see that girl, walk up to her and put your hand on her shoulder, he said, acting out his words, and just say, hey. Hey. Naruto repeated in disbelief. That's it? Well, there's more to it than that, but yeah, That's the gist of it, come on. Get up and try it on Miles, Eren said. What now? Miles asked. I don't know about that. Naruto offered up his own reluctance. Oh, will you two quit being such wusses and try it, Eren insisted. Reluctantly, Naruto walked up to his friend, placing a hand on his shoulder. Hey? Similarity. Miles placed his own hand on Naruto's shoulder and repeated the word in a similar state of discomfort. Hey. No man, not like that. You gotta say it like you mean it, like this. Hey. Eren elongated the word, somehow managing to sound much cooler than either of them, lending credence to what he was teaching them. Hey, Naruto tried, elongating the word as well. Hey, Miles repeated in a similar stilted manner. They stared at one another before Naruto broke first, pulling away. Okay. This is getting weird, he said. Yeah, Miles agreed. Eren burst out laughing. Man, I can't believe you guys actually fell for that. Uncle Eren. Miles shouted. Flustered, Naruto could only palm his own forehead, feeling like a true idiot. Sorry, Eren said in between chuckles, wiping away a stray tear, but I just had to. You guys are just easy to mess with, but I wasn't lying when I said it works. You just have to say it right, and to a girl, or a guy, if that's what either of you are into. No judgment here. Uncle Eren, come on, Miles protested, almost as if to save them from further embarrassment. Both Naruto and Miles' phones chimed. That from your girl? Eren asked Naruto. It was a text from his mother, wishing him a good night and telling him she loved him with way too many kissy face emojis. No, Naruto said with a sigh, not at all. He locked and pocketed his phone, deciding he would text his mother back in the morning. We should probably get going soon, Uncle Eren, Miles said as he stared at his own phone. Eren gave no indication he heard what was said. Instead he made his way back to where they were sitting earlier, picking up the notebook Miles had been scribbling in earlier. He whistled loudly, flipping through the pages. Hey, these are pretty good. You been holding out on me, nephew? Eren asked, presenting to them the notebook with Miles' illustration. These would look amazing on a wall. Have you put any of these up yet? You know my dad, Miles said with slumped shoulders. He'd kill me if I did. Naruto recalled Miles often describing his father as the world's most boring cop. That was a touchy subject for him because not only was his own father a police officer, but at the very least he had his father, and mother for that matter. It always took his every self-restraining from voicing such bitter thoughts every time his friend complained. Don't let that stop you. I got a spot you would not believe if you were up for it, Eren said, trying to hype up his nephew. That unnerved Naruto slightly. He fully believed Eren to be a cool person, lax and inviting. However, to suggest his own nephew break the law by tagging. He was unsure of what to make of that. Unfortunately, after some more convincing, Miles gave in, and that's how Naruto found himself unwillingly going deeper into the city than he had in a very long time. He really didn't want to go with them but felt an obligation to his friend to accompany him, but if he was being honest with himself, he never really could say no. Naruto's trepidation grew as soon as they hit the tracks of the subway system. His eyes were peeled while his remaining senses remained on high alert, looking and listening for any signs of an incoming train. Beyond even the possibility of being made into mushy rat food, he was more worried about what his mother would say or do if she were to discover he broke curfew to hang out with Miles and his uncle of questionable morals. The last time had snuck out Shed grounded him for an entire month, and that was just to watch a movie, an R-rated movie. He couldn't even begin to imagine what she would do if she found out he was breaking the law, if even by association. They walked for what felt like miles along the tracks, through many cutaways and even more tunnels until they finally reached a tall metal fence. Above it was a sign. Alchemax, private, property. With that, Naruto felt his already frayed nerves double. If they were caught they would be in so much trouble. His main concern, fear really, lay more so in what his mother would do to him rather than the authorities themselves. This way guys, we're almost there, Eren said. He proceeded to jump the fence, ceiling high, with a grace and precision that had Miles in awe, and Naruto believing had done so often. Naruto and Miles shared a look before the former stepped forward, feeling there was no backing out now and hoping to get it over as soon as possible. Naruto ran and jumped, catching the top of the fence with one hand. His other had slipped. He could feel his only grip on the fence weakening momentarily, but he managed to dig his feet into the fence, allowing him to grasp the top with both hands. He struggled some but finally managed to pull himself up and over, almost falling on his way down. Not bad, Aaron said, making the corresponding face. Your form could use some work but not bad at all. I like the initiative. You're up next, nephew. Miles' attempt was far less graceful. Being younger than Naruto and shorter still, he could not reach the top of the fence as easily. Once he did, his foot caught the fence, making him fall face first from the top. Miles. You okay? Naruto quickly rushed to his friend's side to help him off. Totally cool, Miles said while dusting himself off. He was trying to play his fall off but Naruto could see the slight limp in his step. Just beyond the fence was a narrowed hallway which eventually gave way to a large opening in the loose shape of an octagon. The ceiling was tall for being underground, leading up to a brick sky. With an electric slam, Aaron illuminated the room to reveal various street portraits. Some appeared older, slightly faded in color despite never once being exposed to the light of day, while others offered more vibrant colors. Whoa! Isles cheered as he ran into the opening, taking it all in for himself. Brooklyn! He shouted through cupped hands. The room shouted right back, echoing his call thrice. There's history on these walls, Aaron stated fondly, his own eyes surveying the room. Come on then, nephew, get to work, he said, pulling from within his own backpack a can of purple spray paint and an old boombox. He tossed the paint to Miles and set the boombox down. You're on your own now. Naruto joined Aaron on the old car seat placed in the center of the room, enthralled as he watched Miles work to the beat of old-school hip-hop. His passion for his art was tangible in his smooth and motivated movements. You want in on this, Naruto? Aaron asked from beside him, holding a can of paint in his hand. No, I am good just watching. Besides, I've never really been good at drawing, or anything artful really. I'd just ruin it, Naruto admitted. He was slightly jealous of his friend's talent in that regard. He never realized up until then just how much he wished he could draw. So, what are you into? Aaron asked. Yak now. School, comics, video games, anime, that kind of thing, Naruto said, feeling like a complete loser at not being able to produce anything more than what most people were interested in. Come on man, there has to be something you enjoy doing outside of reading books and playing video games, Aaron said, pressing him kindly. Well, Naruto began, somewhat reluctantly, it's not really something I am currently doing but it is something I want to do. Yak now, eventually. Oh yeah, and what's that? Aaron asked with what sounded like genuine interest. I know it's kinda weird, but I want to learn how to fight, Naruto said. Fight? Like martial arts, or boxing maybe? Aaron asked, intrigued. Something like that, yeah, Naruto said. Honestly, I don't exactly know what I'd like to learn but I do eventually want to learn a practice. Not a bad goal, depending on what you want to fight for, Aaron said with a nod of approval. Naruto smiled at the man's praise. Thanks, this'll probably sound kinda cheesy, but I want to learn how to fight so that I can protect my mother. I promised my old man I would always look after her. Aaron looked down and away. That mean he ain't around anymore? Yeah, Naruto admitted sadly. He died 3 years ago, with him not around. I feel like it falls on me to take care of my mom. Yak now. That's why I am trying so hard at Vision, even though I hate it. It's so I can find a good career to lessen the burden on her. That's also why I want to learn how to fight. I want to always protect her. I can definitely respect that, Aaron said, patting his shoulder. I lost my pops when I was young too. I know it can be hard. Yeah, Naruto laughed so that he didn't cry, feeling his eyes burn and emotion waver his voice. Yeah, it sucks but what can you do? They both fell silent for a time, watching Miles work, listening to the music reverberate off the concrete walls. Who was your father, if you don't mind my asking? Aaron asked. You might be actually heard his name before. Naruto smiled at the memory of his father. He was the police commissioner for the Brooklyn PD for a time. It's actually how I first met Miles. His dad and mine were friends even though we weren't back then. We actually got to know each other better when we started at Vision. I thought you looked familiar, Aaron said, looking at him. You're Minato's kid. You knew my dad? Naruto asked. Aaron seemed to flinch in that time. Naruto was certain of it. Kind of. My brother may have mentioned him from time to time. I also saw him on TV a few times, Aaron said. Didn't seem too fond of Spider-Man. Yeah, Naruto agreed. Awkwardly, say, kid, Aaron began after another lull in conversation. Yeah? How's about I teach you how to fight? Aaron asked. I know a little mixed martial arts myself. You won't be winning any tournaments, mind you, But when I am done with you, you should be able to fend for yourself. Really? Naruto felt his hopes rising. You would really do that? Yeah, man, Eren said with a nonchalant shrug of his shoulders. Can't have my nephew hanging around with some book nerd. Now, a book nerd who can fight? That's pretty cool. Naruto smiled widely at that. Idea like that. Hey guys, check this out, Miles called to them. Whoa, Naruto was impressed by the finished product. In the short time he and Eren were talking, Miles had created a true work of art. Awesome job, nephew, Eren praised, but there's one more thing you need to do. Eren shook a can of white spray paint before tracing the outline of Miles' body, his figure standing forever proud before his creation. I'll take a picture if you two want to stand there, Naruto said. Pulling his phone out, he felt something land on his hand but figured it to be a drop of water or dirt debris as he focused on the painting with Miles and Eren standing before it. Just as he took the picture, he felt a sharp pain on the back of his hand. Ah, spider. Naruto slapped the spider, swatting it away. I hate spiders. Dude, is there anything you aren't scared of? Miles joked. Who knows, maybe you'll become the next Spider-Man. Or, more likely, it's venomous and it'll die, Naruto rebutted sarcastically. Listen guys, I've got to get going, Eren announced, his previous good mood suddenly absent as he looked at his phone. I'll lead you guys out of here and we'll catch up sometime soon. Eren left at the subway platform before disappearing into the night in something of a hurry. While Miles was busy inspecting his handiwork from his phone, Naruto was leaning against the wall of the subway. He had his arms wrapped around himself, shivering while feeling incredibly lightheaded. Nice camera work, Naruto. You ever consider becoming a photographer? Maybe you can help that weirdo at the Daily Bugle take more pictures of Spider-Man, Miles said with a chuckle. I am totally setting this as my wallpaper. Naruto didn't answer. His vision was beginning to blur and suddenly, everything was growing loud, unbearably so, from the voices of his fellow passengers, to the rumbling of the train track. It was all becoming too much. Naruto? Miles' voice was the loudest, sounding as though he was shouting directly into his ear. Yo man, you okay? Everything's so loud, Naruto said through clenched teeth. He shut his eyes tight and pressed both of his hands over his ears, and yet, it did little to diminish the searing pain in his head. It felt as though someone was jabbing the center of his brain with a burning stake, the pain growing worse by the moment. Soon all the noises, the pain, it melded together to disorient him. Idly Naruto felt himself being ushered along. His arm draped over the shoulder of who he barely acknowledged as Miles. When next his senses began to return to him, he found his world lurching sideways as he impacted his bed, sending him into a deeper world of hurt. Naruto, talk to me, man, Miles almost shouted, slapping his cheeks a few times. Don't do that, Naruto groaned, weakly pushing him away. Head hurts. You're alive. Miles sounded relieved. Turn the lights off, Naruto rasped, feeling the invading light burn his eyes. Dude, the lights are off. Miles sounded worried once more, but I'll close the blinds. The lack of light lessened his pain to an extent hardly noticeable, but it did help. Suddenly another wave of cold poured over him like ice water. Naruto rolled in bed, wrapping himself as tightly as possible in his sheets before balling up into the fetal position. Do you maybe want to go to the hospital? Miles asked nervously. That spider may have been poisonous. Spiders are venomous, not poisonous, Naruto whispered, and no hospitals. My mom'll kill me if she finds I left vision. You know what I meant, and dude, she can't kill you if you're already dead, Miles argued. She'd find a way. Now shut up, I just need to rest my eyes for a little bit, Naruto muttered, feeling the pain in his entire body begin to fade, in its place a deep yearning for sleep. Bro, don't say that, Miles was shouting again. That's what people say just before they die. Despite his friend's cry, Naruto slipped into the darkness of unconsciousness. In what felt like a blink of the eye, Naruto woke up to the sun warming his face. The invading light, while pleasant, blinded him momentarily until he rolled onto his side to hide himself from it. Memories of the night before came rushing back to him just as he realized everything remained so very loud. He could hear distant conversations, laughter, and the sounds of traffic, all in great detail. It was enough detail to make him begin to question his sanity. Naruto listened as a girl break up with a boy, heard as he cried afterwards, and how the others around him laughed, Some ways away there was a small fender bender and a subsequent verbal altercation that quickly turned explicit. Everything was beginning to grow far too loud again, nearing becoming overwhelming. That's when he decided to focus on his breathing, trying and succeeding in calming himself, tuning out the noise of the world around. Soon, all he could hear was Miles snoring and his own thoughts, which also somehow sounded louder than usual. Naruto moved to sit on the edge of his bed, only to slam his forehead on one of the metal supports of the top bunk. The impact was very loud and hard enough to rattle the entire frame, but oddly enough, it didn't hurt despite definitely feeling it. He did leave a sizable bend in the metal support. Putting it past him for the time being, he realized his friend was seated on the computer chair, positioned directly next to his bed. His head was lolled to one side, his mouth hanging slightly open as he snored. In his hand was his phone tethered to the wall by a charger cable. The screen showing he was ready and set to call emergency services as apparent by the 3 digits dialed. "Thanks, buddy," Naruto said in a whisper and with a smile. He gently pulled Miles' phone from his hand and set it on the desk, wheeling his slumbering friend closer to his bed where he proceeded to kick him into it. Miles rolled into bed with little more than a confused grumble but otherwise remained asleep, curling himself up into a ball around the pillow. "I'll wash those later," Naruto muttered, seeing his friend already begin drooling on it. He was startled when his own phone's alarm began to blare. Like everything else before, it was loud, the abrupt noise making him jump in place. What the? Naruto was currently staring at the ductwork hidden in the ceiling, had just put his head through. When he pulled himself down, he was once more surprised to find he remained hanging from the ceiling via his hands alone. Briefly Naruto wondered if he was still asleep, somehow having a very lucid dream. It was the only immediate rational explanation he had for what he was currently experiencing. However, it was that same rational thought process that just as quickly dismissed the notion. He was awake and he knew it. With that established, Naruto fully allowed himself to panic, confused as to just how he was sticking to the ceiling. More importantly than that, however, was exactly how he was supposed to get himself down. Naruto began by pulling his hands while kicking his feet, though try as he might, they remained firmly attached. The plaster began to come loose beneath his hands with audible cracks and crunches the harder he pulled, forming growing piles in the carpet. He flinched and took a few calming breaths, regaining a semblance of composure. Once more he tried to pull his hands free, softly this time, yet as firmly as possible so as not to commit further property damage. When it became apparent this would not be happening without making a second and third hole in the ceiling, Naruto tried to leverage himself better by pulling his feet up, planting them against the ceiling, finding this incredibly easy despite knowing it was an incredible feat of strength and agility. This ended up being a further mistake once he realized that on top of his hands, his feet were now firmly stuck to the roof as well. Well shit. Naruto resigned himself to being expelled for destroying the ceiling and decided to pull hard. In doing so he found himself falling. Oh shit. He shut his eyes, putting his hands forward in anticipation of the coming pain. Only it never came. After a few tense moments, and Miles snoring, Naruto opened his eyes to find he was floating. No, not floating. Naruto looked up, or rather down to his feet, finding they were still attached to the ceiling, the plaster warping outward beneath his weight. What is happening right now? Why the hell can't I get down? Naruto growled in frustration at the entire situation, unaware of how loud he spoke until he came face to face with Miles. Naruto? There was drool on his face and his eyes were half-lidded with sleep. This is all a dream? Naruto said while waving his hands, his fingers more specifically, in Miles' face. Go back to sleep. Oh, okay. Miles promptly fell back into bed, turning to face the wall, pulling the sheets with him. Good night. Upside down Naruto. I'll worry about why you're in my dreams later. Naruto could not believe that worked, but somehow it had, as evident by his friend's continued snores. Deciding he'd had enough of the situation, Naruto pulled himself up again and placed his hands on an undamaged section of the roof. His hands stuck again, as he was hoping for. That's when an idea occurred to him. Closing his eyes, Naruto willed his feet to come loose, and to his immense relief, they did. He laughed in relief briefly before remembering his sleeping friend. With his feet loose, he pulled the nearby computer chair as close as he could to support himself, but unfortunately all he could only reach the backrest from where he hung. Well, here goes nothing, Naruto said before willing himself to let go of the ceiling. To his momentary relief, his hands detached, dropping him. His feet landed on the arm rests of the computer chair. his downward momentum kicking it out from under his feet, making him fall flat onto his back with an audible thump. The air in his lungs was expelled in the form of a gasp, finding what should have hurt him, did not. Beside him, Miles snorted but otherwise remained in a deep sleep, allowing Naruto a moment to consider it all. Okay. This definitely isn't normal and I don't think I am going crazy, so then what's happening to me? Naruto pondered aloud, though he had an idea, an impossible theory. He woke up sticking to the ceiling after getting bitten by a spider the night before. But there was no way what once happened to his hero was now happening to him. The chances were astronomical and many had tried and failed to recreate the famous spider bite once it was revealed to be the origins of Spider-Man's abilities in his self-published comics. Those who were lucky were left with only an itchy bite and the sad realization they weren't suddenly Spider-Man, while others discovered they were allergic to spider venom, and even a few unfortunate souls discovered they were extremely allergic to spider venom. The Daily Bugle had a field day with that story. His descent into denial and disbelief was interrupted by the sound of the first warning bell ringing. Naruto decided to forego what was beginning to become a mental breakdown in exchange for attending class. If he missed even one, the school would alert his mother, and that was the absolute last thing he needed in that moment. Naruto dressed himself in a rush, throwing on his uniform, and was befuddled to discover both his pants and dress shirts were very tight on him. His shoes as well. He left the dorm believing he may have somehow hit another growth spur, willfully ignoring yet another semblance to his hero's origins. The enhanced voices of those around returned full force in the hallways, and unlike coalesced chatter, he could make out, focus in on, and process all of their words individually, all of which sounded as if they were spoken directly into his ears. Some of their conversations were idle and of nothing of any importance, while others were in regards to him. Some pointed out how much he was sweating, while others, mostly the girls, questioned if he was always so tall. Girls and even some boys seemed to take a great interest in his muscles, evidently on display due to the tightness of his clothing. Muscles he was sure he didn't have, at least not before. Naruto took a moment to inspect his arms, flexing his biceps to find out he indeed have muscles that were not present before, the fabric of his dress shirt stretching to its absolute limit. He even briefly pulled up his shirt, eliciting a wave of gasps, even more chatter, and even a wolf whistle. With a fierce blush, Naruto pulled his shirt down quickly and rushed a corner, abruptly coming to a full stop when the hairs on his arms perked up. Instinctively his attention shot up from his feet, his focus immediately drawn to the blonde girl walking towards him. It was Gwen Stacy. She also stopped a few feet short of him, mindless of the flow of foot traffic they were disrupting to regard him. He stared into her large blues, feeling his every instinct flare in her direction, warning him of her presence, and yet he did not feel any inklings of fear one normally would in a dangerous situation. Her eyes were widened for some reason, as if surprised by something, but Naruto was too distracted by her sudden appearance to really consider why that may be. "You look like shit, Foxy," Gwen said, her wide-eyed expression morphing into a smirk, her cool and composure returning. Naruto laughed at this. "And you look amazing." His eyes proceeded to widen to their maximum ability at having said what he was thinking aloud. He slapped a hand over his mouth in vain. The damage had already been done. Gwen stared back at him with a pierced brow pitched, a smile playing on her face that showed the cute gap in her teeth. Thankfully, it seemed to be one of amusement, though that did very little to lessen the utter embarrassment Naruto felt then and there. "A little forward, but I like it," Gwen said, placing a hand on her hip. "You've changed since the last time we met." "Can't quite place what it is, though," she finished, walking closer to him, inspecting him with scrutinizing eyes. Naruto leaned back but remained rooted in place by her piercing stare. Suddenly, the nerves he experienced when first meeting the beautiful blonde returned, and he was left at a complete loss for both words and action as she continued to look him over from head to toe. She was so very close. Close enough he could see her every imperfection, which were few, the intricate patterns of her irises, and smell her perfume. His face was growing hotter by the passing second. The palms of his clenched fists at his side were quickly accumulating sweat. "You do something with your hair, maybe?" Gwen said, finishing her analyzing of him by meeting his eyes once more. Class," Naruto shook his head. That was not at all what he meant to say. "I mean, I need to get to class, and no, I didn't do anything with my hair, new shoes, that's why I seem taller." Gwen hummed, "Didn't say you looked taller, but now that you mention it," once more she seemed to appraise him head to toe, looking up at him. "You're taller than me now, she finished with a thoughtful hum. Right. Naruto cleared his throat without having the need, "I'll see ya later." As he made to push past her, his senses alerted him of something fast approaching them. Acting out of pure instinct, Naruto pushed Gwen aside just as a football soared through the air behind them. It took him only moments to realize had pushed Gwen up against the lockers, their faces only inches away from one another. All around people stopped to watch the interaction with great interest, the football crashing against the attended recipient's face. "All right. Maybe a little too forward," Gwen said following a chuckle, placing a hand on his chest, firmly pushing him back, "but you can let go now." Naruto's face further flushed once he realized he had her by the shoulders. He tried to let go but found he was unable to because deep down, he really didn't want to. There was just something about Gwen Stacy that attracted him to her beyond just her looks. Had known and even spoken to a few beautiful girls, but none ever took him out of his element as much as she was somehow able to. Gwen was something else. "Oh, right, sorry." Naruto tried to let go again but only pulled her closer, close enough that their noses were only a hair's diameter from touching. "Seriously, Naruto, let go," Gwen said, sounding annoyed now, with her own light shade of pink dusting her cheeks. "Yeah, working on it, let me just," Naruto trailed off. Tasting her breath on his lips briefly short-circuited his mind. He recomposed himself as best he could hope to, hearing the gossip around him increase, further flustering him. Without fully realizing what he was doing, his right hand came free, coming to rest on the side of her head for leverage. He pulled hard, ripping the shoulder section of her outfit, exposing it in the process. "Got it?" Naruto cheered, waving his cloth-covered hand. "Do you?" Gwen deadpanned. Naruto hummed in confusion before realizing what had done, his face growing so hot that he wouldn't be surprised if there was steam coming out of his ears. The black strap of her bra was now visible to him above a shoulder speckled with freckles. To make matters far worse, his right hand was now nestled in her hair to the point his fingers were obscured by a curtain of blonde. Wait. Let me just." Gwen's hand snapped up, holding his right hand in place with enough force to almost hurt. "Don't you dare pull your hand away, Naruto." He swallowed hard at how angry she looked. Naruto missed his first class but he no longer cared. He had a sneaking suspicion Gwen wasn't too pleased with him at the moment. His first hint was the fact she had not spoken so much as a single word to him throughout the entire time the nurse was cutting her hair to free his hand. He tried to apologize more than once but she ignored him every time and was gone before he could so much as utter a word, storming off in the opposite direction once separated. As much as he wanted to go after her and make things right, he had a now undeniable truth he needed to deal with first. He had powers eerily similar to that of Spider-Man in his ability to stick to walls and girls' hair. Though he doubted his hero ever befell such a situation, his senses were also incredibly enhanced and the only thing he wasn't sure had been granted was super strength. That was until he tried to wash his hands free of Gwen's hair and broke off the bathroom handle, flooding it entirely. That's when Naruto decided that if he wanted to understand what was truly happening to him, he would have to go back to where it first began. In lieu of somehow chancing a meeting with Spider-Man himself, it was the only thing he could think to do. With a newfound sense of direction, Naruto easily retraced their steps from the night before through the complicated subway system until he found the very room where he was bitten. The smell of fresh paint lingered in the darkened room, commingling with the horrid scent of mold he hadn't taken notice of the night before. Naruto flipped the switching, bringing light to the art covering the walls, but he paid little mind to it as he scanned the area. His eyes were drawn to the sight of the glowing spider across the room with an acuteness that was not present beforehand. Carefully, he picked the spider up by one of its spindly legs and inspected it closely, his eyes focusing in on it with an amazing amount of detail, as if he were looking through a magnifying glass. The spider was primarily dark blue in color with red stripes and glowing fangs and leg tips. What intrigued Naruto the most being the large number 42 printed on the spider's abdomen, the name above it giving him pause. Alchemax before he could make the connection as to why the name sounded so familiar. The spider buzzed and glitched in his hand, as though it were a faulty program in a video game. Startled, Naruto dropped the spider and stomped on it out of reflex, leaving only a dark, viscous mess beneath his shoe. What was that? Naruto questioned. Suddenly, he felt on edge in the same way he had earlier with Gwen. He could feel their hair on his arms rise again. His attention was immediately drawn to a white curtain he failed to take notice of in his previous visit, and once more, against his better judgment, he pushed past it to find himself in a wide hallway with a large glass wall on one end. Though his night vision was much better than before, Naruto used his phone's light to survey the room. Wondering why he felt so drawn to it, he immediately grew concerned seeing radioactive warning signs plastering the walls lined with machinery he did not recognize. Among every other piece of foreign machinery was the alchemist's name. He shone his light in the direction of a metallic clank he heard opposite of the glass wall when he abruptly stiffened, his every instinct warning him that his life was in danger. Naruto jumped faster and further than he thought possible. Just as the wall behind him exploded, he turned and began to backpedal to the small section of the now shattered glass wall, breathing hard with both his heart and adrenaline racing. "Norman, listen to me." He flinched hearing a vicious growl followed by a resounding slam. Risking a glance, he peeked over his cover to see the Spider-Man pressed into the side of a storage container. The steel structure caved in from the impact. If not for the gravity of the situation, Naruto would have been gushing at having seen his hero so close. Aside from on the television, he had only ever seen Spider-Man once, swinging high above in the sky, daring past a skyscraper. Even then he wasn't sure if it was just a bird and his enthusiasm which made him believe it. "I can't just let you open a portal to another dimension." But there was no mistaking it now. "Brooklyn's not zoned for that," Spider-Man shouted as he re-engaged his enemy. He once again had to fight the urge to gush at confirming the rumor concerning Spider-Man's sense of humor. Even when in battle, however, any enthuse he may have felt in that moment was immediately replaced with near overwhelming dread at the approach of the gargantuan green monster which menacingly approached his hero, the very ground quacking with its every step. It was the Green Goblin. There was no mistaking the villain's massive stature, sickly green-scaled skin, and goblin-like face and his purple-painted hat. He was many times more frightening in person than he was on video. "I already told you it's not up to me," Green Goblin growled, continuing his menacing march. "Why won't you quit, Spider-Man?" "Well, I guess I don't like the idea of Brooklyn being sucked into a black hole," Spider-Man quipped in response, swinging to meet the giant head-on. "Staten Island, maybe." That's when Naruto decided he'd seen enough. Now more than ever, his instincts were screaming at him to run. Had made it only a few feet before he was prompted by his instincts to turn around just in time to see a large yellow beam careening in his direction. Knowing he wouldn't be able to move in time, he put his hands out, miraculously catching it, only to be pushed back. The concrete beneath his feet shattered at the sheer force, leaving two nasty gouges in the floor. Pushing with all his might, Naruto threw the beam at the Green Goblin without realizing what had done until it collided with the monster. It growled in pain but otherwise seemed to shrug of the unexpected attack, bringing both his and Spider-Man's attention to him at once. "What the?" Spider-Man was slapped aside as the Green Goblin lobbed a bomb in his other attacker's direction. Naruto avoided a direct hit but the resulting explosion behind him both burned and rocketed him closer towards the conflict. He hit the ground hard and rolled over quickly sensing the Green Goblin dive-bombing him, only for Spider-Man to swing in and kick the goblin away just in time to save him. "Get out of here, kid!" Spider-Man yelled, webbing the walls to slingshot himself towards Green Goblin. "That's what I am trying to do," Naruto cried, but his words were drowned out in more explosions. Naruto tried to run away again but Green Goblin managed to throw one more bomb than Spider-Man was able to web away or deflect, caving in his escape route, trapping him further in their conflict. That's how Naruto found himself the unwilling participant of a three-way conflict in which he did little else but run for his life, dodging shrapnel and collapsing steel as Spider-Man's and Green Goblin's fight intensified. Spider-Man was doing everything in his power to keep the goblin away from Naruto but with his every attempt, the villain came closer to getting to him. That was until the goblin managed to land another close bomb throw just as he was kicked into a larger opening. The resulting explosion once again launched Naruto forward, furthering his momentum from his previous attempt at leaping away from the bomb. He was thrown into a massive cylindrical area miles long in every direction covered in white, octagon-shaped panels. There were gaps in the massive structure clearly still under construction, with scaffolding protruding from a few of them. On each side of the expanse were rocket booster-shaped devices with what appeared to be a viewing booth at the center of the structure. They were hadron colliders, Naruto realized. He recalled a field trip he'd taken to a science museum dedicated to man's greatest inventions. From the wheel to the early computer, almost every invention on display were obvious replicas of their inspiration, and he was particularly interested in the Large Hadron Collider himself for the promises of what it could herald. This all flashed within Naruto's mind in mere milliseconds before he realized he was falling that great distance, heading towards certain death in the darkness of one of the openings. Knowing despite having powers he would die if he hit the ground, all he could do was scream as gravity pulled him. "Gotcha, kid!" Spider-Man shouted, webbing his back just before he passed through the opening, sending him flying towards a nearby scaffolding. Naruto somehow landed on his feet, with Spider-Man dropping down beside him a moment later, pulling him down to hide behind a large piece of plywood. They stared at one another, both their senses flaring. "Oh wow, you're just like me." Spider-Man managed to sound genuinely surprised despite his breathing hard. "But how's that even possible? Better yet, what are you doing here, kid?" "Got bitten by a spider that I am guessing was radioactive," Naruto relayed, equally breathless. "Yeah, that can have some unexpected side effects," Spider-Man muttered. A roar reminded both of the threat that lay just beyond. "Listen, kid. I know you're probably scared right now, but I just need you to sit tight while I take care of this. When I am done, we can talk about this and see about maybe teaching you the ropes." Really?" Naruto couldn't believe what was happening. Spider-Man was offering to train him of all people. It was like a dream come true. "Yeah, I know it can be scary going at it alone," Spider-Man said, ruffling his hair. "Now remember, stay out of sight, be right back." With that said, Spider-Man leapt into the air, swinging away. Naruto watched in both awe and horror as Spider-Man continued to fight with Green Goblin, just when it seemed had gotten the upper hand and crawled his way up to a hidden control panel in the ceiling. A streak of violet light knocked him away. His feeling of dread intensified as he watched the Prowler join the fight, with Spider-Man quickly losing control of the situation. Him getting beaten and battered by the combined efforts of the two villains. His every instincts were currently clashing within him as he not only wanted to help his hero, but he also wanted to run away from the very real danger above. He had super strength now, but unlike Spider-Man, he was no skilled fighter, and the Prowler and Green Goblin were amongst Spider-Man's most vicious and dangerous adversaries. There was no way he could stand against either of them, and he knew his interference now would only prove to be detrimental. Naruto had almost resigned himself to failure, tears burning at his eyes as he watched the onslaught continue. Spider-Man was clearly losing the fight between the three, and there was nothing he could do to help. He closed his eyes, but this only amplified his hero's pained shouts. To make matters absolutely worse, both of the machines began to whir to life, presenting yet another danger to Spider-Man. Naruto wondered what his father would do, feeling like an absolute failure to his memory, as he knew the answer to father was very brave and always put the safety of others before that of his own. He, above even Spider-Man, was his first hero and inspiration. Everything around him went quiet and his vision dark. "Remember, Naruto, no matter how scared you are, no matter how helpless the situation may seem, there's always a way forward." His father's smiling face stared back down at him, his expression radiating love and patience, looking exactly how he remembered him last. He was even wearing his police officer's uniform. "Dad?" His own voice echoed in his mind, coming out small and squeaky. His father kneeled down to his level and ruffled his hair much in the way he always did whenever he became emotional, either happy or sad. "There may come a day when I am no longer around to protect you and your mother. If that were ever to happen, I need you to promise me something, Naruto. Promise me you'll be brave for me, and for your mother, no matter what. Promise me you'll look after her and yourself." It was then that Naruto realized he was not hallucinating. He was reliving the memory of the last time he ever saw his father alive. "Promise me, Naruto." "I promise." Naruto's eyes snapped open in time to see the Green Goblin holding Spider-Man in his large talons, pressing into the beam of light now connecting the two colliders. Before he could act on his newfound resolve, there was a blinding flash followed closely by an explosion. He was thrown off the scaffolding, slamming hard against the wall. It hurt, though Naruto was not given time to dwell on the pain as saw both Spider-Man and the Green Goblin falling motionlessly towards the largest opening of the structure. Without thinking twice, he began to sprint, running as hard and as fast as he ever did in his life, and jumped. He caught Spider-Man midair, resulting in both crashing onto the ground, both now beneath the massive structure itself. There were loud explosions sounding off above them, sending large pieces of rubble crashing down the hole they'd fallen into. Naruto quickly pulled Spider-Man away from the fallen debris, stopping hearing him gasp in pain. His body stiffening, He held his hero in his shaking arms as he coughed a few times, the sound horribly wet. Naruto didn't have to be a doctor to know that was a bad thing. Well, that doesn't sound good, Spider-Man said, putting voice to his thoughts. Can you get up? Naruto asked, well aware of the danger they were still very much in. Are you kidding me? I always get up, Spider-Man groaned and held himself at having attempted to raise his voice. Just give me a minute to rest. No, we need to get out of here now, Naruto urged, trying to help him up. Wait. Spider-Man proceeded to erupt into a fit of violent coughs, groaning in pain when it subsided. We have to destroy that collider. What? No, we need to get you help, Naruto argued. Listen to me, kid, we need to get this. Spider-Man showed him a small white flash drive. Up there. I can't move right now, so I need you to swing up there and plug this into the mainframe. If we don't destroy it now, Kingpin will activate it again, and if he does, our world as we know it will come to an end. But I don't know how to swing. I don't even have web shooters, Naruto tried to explain. I only got my powers yesterday. Look, I know you're new to this and I know you're scared, but this has to be done. We have to stop Kingpin. Spider-Man repeated, sounding truly desperate. Naruto looked up to the collider, noting how damaged it appeared. No, we need to get you the hell out of here first. That thing looks messed up, so I doubt he can get it up and running again so soon. Definitely not today. I don't have any more time, Spider-Man admitted regrettably. I am dying. Naruto felt his heart drop into the icy pit of his stomach. What? I can feel it, Spider-Man said, sounding truly defeated. When I was exposed to that collider's beam, I could feel myself being ripped to shreds from the inside. My powers are the only thing keeping me alive right now, but I know I won't make it past today. But we have to try, Naruto tried, feeling his eyes burn anew. If we can just get you to a hospital. There's no use, Spider-Man interrupted him calmly. This is the end of the road for me, kid. Don't say that, Naruto pleaded. Please, please don't say that. You're Spider-Man, you always win. Naruto closed his eyes, trying and failing to stop his tears from falling, but he could already feel them trailing hot paths down his cheeks. Then, feeling a hand rest atop his head, he opened them again. You look familiar, kid. What's your name? Spider-Man asked softly. N. Naruto. Naruto sniffled. N. Namikaze. So you're Minato's son, Spider-Man said following a sharp inhale. You know, he and I were friends. Naruto stared with eyes wide as Spider-Man removed his mask to reveal a young man with dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. Why you were? That didn't sound right, but my dad, he didn't like you. Yeah, Spider-Man said with a smile and tears in his own eyes. Your father acted like he hated me in public to protect both you and your mother from my enemies, but he was my contact inside the Brooklyn PD. I beat them up and he locked them away, kept the long arm of the law away from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This way. That's Kingpin. Spider-Man tossed Naruto his mask, his words turning into hushed whispers. Quick, put the mask on and to me carefully. You can't tell anyone who you are. No one can know. He's got everyone in his pocket and he'll hurt you, your family, everyone you love if he finds out who you are. But put it on, Spider-Man growled. Naruto scrambled to do as he was asked. What about you? He asked behind the mask. I need you to promise me you'll destroy that collider, Spider-Man said. I can't. Promise me. Naruto stared into the mon's eyes and they were serious but pleading. No, I can't just leave you here to die. Naruto cried, trying one more time. I won't make it. I can't even move my body anymore. Please, Naruto, promise me you'll do what I ask, Spider-Man said, his words now pleading as well. His father's words resounded within his thoughts. I promise, Naruto relented. Thank you. Spider-Man smiled at him just as a tear rolled down his cheek. You need to get going right now, but before you do, I have one more favor to ask you. Anything, Naruto said. Protect Mary Jane and May Parker for me. Spider-Man wiped his eyes, the movement strained, his arm shaking. My wife and aunt, after today, everyone will have known who I was. Once they do, everyone I've ever put away will want their revenge. With me gone, they'll go after them. I'll make sure no one hurts them, Naruto said, taking Spider-Man's hand into his own. I'll protect them with my life, I promise. Thank you again, Naruto. Spider-Man smiled at him one more time before his head snapped to the sight of an oncoming purple glow. Now get out of here. Run and don't look back, no matter what. Goodbye. Spider-Man, Naruto said with tears flowing freely. It took every ounce of his willpower to turn away, to let go of his hand and run, leaving behind his last remaining hero. Goodbye. Naruto. Naruto ran without stopping and with no real destination in mind. His racing heart was heavy with grief at having to leave Spider-Man to his certain death. After what felt like hours of running, he ended up in a park. He didn't know which and he didn't care. He found the nearest tree and sat himself beneath it, pulling off the mask. He began openly sobbing, helpless and inconsolable. Much like the night his father died, the world fell away around him as he continued to grieve, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. Wake up, son, Naruto blinked, glancing up and around the park in confusion. For all of an instant, he could have sworn it was his father currently regarding him with concern, but it wasn't. It was a kind-looking patrol officer. Judging by where and just how low the sun was in the sky, it was early in the morning. He looked down to the mask still draped tightly in his hands and felt an immediate and great despair wash over him again. I take it you heard the news then? The officer muttered, sounding sullen. Naruto looked back to the officer to see him regarding the mask in his hands sorrowfully. It's a shame, really, the officer continued. I am one of the few among us who really respected Spider-Man. He did good for this city, and to think he was so young, same age as my boy, actually. Naruto didn't say anything, feeling numb from loss. Do you need me to call someone? The officer asked with concern. I can give you a ride provided you don't lie far, he offered, regarding Naruto closer when he didn't answer. Don't take offense to this, young man, but do you have a home to get back to? Where are we? Naruto asked, ignoring all the man had said. Central Park. Nothing seemed real or in focus as he rode the train back to Brooklyn. His phone was constantly ringing in his pocket, but he made no move to answer it as he continued to stare at the mask in his hands. Around him he could hear others on the train reacting to the fast-traveling news. Their reactions varied from disbelief and denial to outright sobs at the loss of their city's hero. His lament accumulated. If only he had been faster, stronger, if only he managed to have saved Spider-Man, then there wouldn't have been a reason for mourning. Despite his promise, Naruto knew he couldn't do anything to stop Kingpin. He didn't even know how to fight, and he doubted he could miraculously invent web shooters out of thin air and determination alone. New York needed Spider-Man, not a coward. Naruto got off the train, his destination vision. He needed to be alone, and he knew his mother would not give him the space he needed, not after he cut off communications with her for more than a day. The dorm room was empty. Miles' clothing and belongings were gone, and in that moment, Naruto couldn't find it in himself to care. All he wanted to do was lay down in hopes he would wake up from his nightmare. The moment his head hit the pillow, there was a set of soft knocks at the door. Naruto paid them no mind, closing his eyes with the palms of his hands pressed to his temples. He could feel his senses warning him that someone was at the door, reacting with enough familiarity to know exactly who it was. Naruto, open up, it's me, Gwen. I know you're in there. Her voice was muffled from behind the door. Naruto didn't answer, his mind coated by a whirlwind of regrets, his thoughts plagued with what he should have done differently to save Spider-Man. If only, if only, if only, the knocks began again, much more insistent this time around. Naruto, we have to talk about what's happening to you, Gwen said. I know what you are because I am the same. Again, Naruto simply ignored both his senses and the conclusion that standing just outside his door was someone like him. Naruto, if you don't open this door right now, I am gonna let myself in, Gwen warned, her tone becoming serious and demanding. We have to talk about what's happening. Naruto watched the door bend before lurching, the wood slowly snapping at the jamb, revealing a very unhappy Gwen. She stormed in, taking no more than 2 long strides before coming to an abrupt stop, her expression falling to one of concern. Naruto? Gwen rushed to his side, kneeling beside his bed. Are you okay? What happened? He's gone, Naruto muttered. Are you hurt? Gwen asked, looking him up and down, touching his arms. Your clothes are singed. I couldn't save him, Naruto continued. Lost. Gwen's blues widened at his words, seemingly coming to a conclusion. She took a seat next to him where he lay. You were there, weren't you? When this world's Spider-Man, she trailed. I was too late, Naruto said, holding up the battered red mask. He's gone. Gwen laid a hand on his arm. Tell me everything. Naruto looked up to the beautiful girl, feeling nothing as he began his short tale of events leading up to that moment. To Gwen's credit and his relief, she never once interrupted, her full and undivided attention on him. By the end of his retelling, his eyes burned but he couldn't cry anymore. Naruto, I am sorry this happened to you, Gwen said, moving her hand to his, and I know that you're confused and that you're scared, but you can't just lay here and give up, like it or not, ready or not. You're in this now. You're Spider-Man. I am not. Naruto shook his head. I could never be. I don't know what the hell I am doing. I don't even know how to control my powers. I can't stop Kingpin or the Prowler. I know, Gwen said with understanding as she tightened her hold on his hand. That's why I am here. What do you mean? Naruto asked. I am not from this universe, Naruto. Gwen began sounding somewhat reluctant. About a week ago, I was pulled from my universe into this one. I don't know how and I don't know why, but my spider senses told me I would find answers here, at Vision. Wait. Naruto sat up in bed, moving to sit beside her. Spider senses? Does that mean? That's what I've been trying to say, Foxy. Gwen offered him a gentle smile. I am the Spider-Woman from my universe. Long story short, I was bitten by a radioactive spider. It's how I got my powers. The Hadron Collider, Naruto said with hands on his knees, gripping them anxiously. Spider-Man was exposed to it. Maybe because of your similar genetics, it pulled you here. It's a bit of a stretch, but unfortunately, it's all we've got to work with for now, Gwen said with a shrug. No, but wait, Naruto looked to her. That doest make sense. You said you arrived here a week ago, but this all happened last night. Yeah, but I think I was somehow thrown into last week, Gwen said, her face crunching up in thought. In my universe, it was the 23rd when I was pulled in. It's the 24th today, Naruto said, glancing at his watch to confirm this. With what happened yesterday, that means you came here on the 16th. Exactly, Gwen confirmed. This is all so confusing, Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, you're telling me, Gwen said with a rueful chuckle, but for now, I think we should focus on one thing. What's that? Naruto asked. Stopping Kingpin and destroying that collider, Gwen said. That's two things, Naruto said, holding up two fingers. Did you seriously just? Gwen abruptly tensed in pain. Her body flickering much like the spider had. She cried out in pain, and when Naruto tried to steady her, his hands phased right through her. Gwen? Naruto panicked. He tried to grab her again, managing to do so this time. He took her in his arms. The strange occurrence lasted only seconds, leaving Gwen panting and pained. That didn't feel very good, she muttered. Are you okay? What was that? Naruto asked. Don't know, it's never happened to me before, Gwen said, taking a deep breath, though I have a feeling it may have something to do with why I am here when I am not supposed to be. Oh, and you can let go of me now. Naruto realized he was in fact still holding her very close to himself, closer than had ever held a girl. His arm wrapped around her shoulder in a side hug, her head resting in the crook of his neck, large eyes regarding him with an unknown expression. As if burned, he released her, putting as much distance between them as he possibly could with a blush flaming his face. Sorry, he muttered in a pitch higher than he would have liked. No, it's okay. Thank you, Naruto, Gwen smiled, somewhat nervously as she tucked some of her hair behind her ear. It was then he realized her hair was cut shorter on one side in a way that somehow even made her look even more beautiful than before, though he wisely chose not to mention it considering her new hairstyle was his fault. Yeah, no problem, but what are we gonna do now? Naruto asked. I don't know if I can do this on my own, Naruto, Gwen admitted, looking away. I've only been Spider-Woman for 2 years, I am good but I am going to need your help. But I just now got my powers, Naruto offered reluctantly. How can I be of any help? Well, Gwen began, standing. She offered him her hand. Let's just hope you're a quick learner, Foxy, because I am about to teach you how to be the new Spider-Man. Naruto accepted her invitation. Holding her soft hand in his, she pulled him to his feet with a beaming grin. Suddenly, he felt as though maybe he wasn't as alone as had thought. Without being given any explanation, Gwen instructed Naruto follow her and had done just that without any real question on his end. In the silence he perceived to be awkward, he was given time to take in his surroundings. All around people were still in mourning, many with their heads down. This itself wasn't exactly a foreign sight in the age of technology, but there was hardly a phone in hand, It was almost as if the hustle and bustle of the city was muted. So Naruto began, elongating the verbal tick. Where are we going exactly? We need to find somewhere secluded so we can test your powers, Gwen briefly explained, the bulk of her attention drawn to their surroundings. He followed her eyes to the side of a bank that doubled as a telecaster which was currently displaying the grinning face of Peter B. Parker, Spider-Man's true identity. It also announced his funeral would be held later that same day, along with a brief interview with his wife, but they rounded the block before he could hear more. Peter Parker, Naruto muttered the name, realizing Spider-Man was right in that the world now knew who he was. Funny, the Peter Parker in my universe turned into the lizard, Gwen offered with an undeniable sadness molding her words. That doesn't sound very funny, Naruto said, and just about slapped himself for doing so. Now more than ever he hated his inability to talk to girls. That's because it isn't, Gwen said following a sigh. I am sorry to hear that, Naruto quickly added. He was very much interested in hearing more of her universe and how it differed from his, but knew that it was neither the time or place to bother her with his nerdy questions or theories. Naruto began, spurred on by another billboard displaying more pictures of Peter and a beautiful redhead whom he assumed to be Mary Jane. But he also felt he didn't deserve to speak his real name. Spider-Man said I should find his Aunt May first, not sure why her specifically, but I did promise I would protect his family, and he was right, everyone knows who he was now. That's why it's so important we get you trained as much as we can, as quickly as we can. This Kingpin seems especially dangerous. Not to mention this Prowler character, and the Green Goblin who, by the way, is way scarier than the one in my universe, Gwen said. Doesn't help they're all working together, making this whole situation that much more dangerous. That, Naruto trailed off, ending in a sigh and a shake of his head. He hadn't actually considered it in that way. Suddenly, he was feeling much more apprehensive about what was to come. So you're gonna teach me to fight? Sorta, Gwen said, throwing him a quick glance over her shoulder. Sorta? Naruto repeated. Well, I don't exactly know what all powers you have. Mine on the other hand give me superhuman strength, amazing reflexes, and the ability to stick to walls. I usually fight using a combination of all three, and so after a time, I kinda developed my own method of fighting. Don't really have a name for it, though, Gwen explained, finishing with a shrug. Your own fighting style, huh? Naruto hummed. How about Gwen Kwando? Or maybe even Gwen Jutsu? You're such a dork, Gwen said following a snort, but from where Naruto was trailing behind Gwen, he could see her cheeks rising in what he recognized to be a smile, and that's what he was hoping for. They arrived at what once must have been a bustling industrial section of Brooklyn, taking to the lot of an old warehouse of sorts, adjacent to some tall above-ground subway tracks. The warehouse itself was a massive brick building the color of rusted metal, with more broken windows than intact. A great portion of the ground-level section of the walls were tagged all over with various pieces of colorful art, giving the otherwise dull red surroundings a splash of color. Naruto was reminded of Miles and briefly wondered what happened to his friend upon recalling his things weren't in their dorm, and he couldn't think of any reasons as to why. Of course he was aware Miles had been trying to get himself kicked out of Vision since his second day, and it was possible he may have finally succeeded in doing so. If that were the case, he would sincerely miss his friend, but Naruto would also accept it. Alright then, let's start by testing your strength, Gwen announced, shaking him from his thoughts. She motioned to an abandoned car in the lot. One of three. Try and flip it over. I don't know about that, Naruto reluctantly said. Gwen narrowed her eyes at him in confusion. What are you reluctant about exactly? Assuming your powers are anything like mine, or this Spider-Man's, you should have superhuman strength. That's actually really cool, Naruto said, feeling a brief rush of excitement knowing he had at least some level of enhanced strength considering what had done to the school restroom. But his reluctance was elsewhere, but also not what I am worried about. Then what are you waiting for? Gwen asked, crossing her arms with a hint of impatience to her question. Well, you want me to flip over someone's car. Not only is that illegal, but that's just wrong. I mean, I don't have a car, but if I did, I know I'd be upset if someone just up and flipped it over, Naruto explained. Gwen pitched a single pierced brow, staring at him hard. Are you being serious right now? Am I being serious about property damage? Yes, I think I am, Naruto said, taking a step back seeing her begin to frown. It has no freaking tires, Gwen huffed, pointing out the fact. She proceeded to motion to the other two vehicles in a similar state of disrepair. None of them do. Shit. They're probably all older than you and I put together. This is obviously some dumping grounds for unwanted cars. Or an upstart dealership going through some hard times, Naruto countered. Naruto. Gwen almost shouted, we don't have time for your bullshit right now. Fine, Naruto relented, feeling somewhat hurt by her tone and words. The time for jokes had clearly come and gone. I am sorry if my parents taught me how to be mindful of others' property. Gwen rolled her blues at him as he approached the car she first indicated. Naruto began stretching, touching his toes, followed by some lower back stretches, and finally 8 squats before she interrupted him. And you're stretching now, Gwen groused behind gritted teeth and a palm to her face. What did I just say? Back problems wait for no one, Naruto said as he competed a couple of torso twists. Coach McGuire says so. Naruto. This time, Gwen did shout, fine, fine. Naruto shook his hands as he kneeled beside the car, in between the front and rear passenger doors. He knew he had superhuman strength, he just wasn't sure he had enough to fully lift a car, even one missing all 4 wheels, all of its electronics, and parts of the engine. With this in mind, and the fact there was a cute girl to impress, he pulled at the undercarriage with nearly all of his strength. The car was immediately launched high into the sky, spinning violently 12 times before crashing loudly on the roof of the warehouse. Naruto drew a breath through his teeth as the car teetered on the edge for a few tense seconds before what must have been either a breeze or his luck which sent it crashing back onto the concrete with a loud boom. It crumpled into itself like a crushed tin can, punctuating the fact he'd definitely gone overboard in his attempts. Ah, my bad. Naruto chanced to glance over to Gwen, finding her wide-eyed, stunned really. He wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad thing. Do it again, Gwen muttered after what seemed like a solid minute of stunned silence. She pointed at a different vehicle. A van that was once white. Pick it up this time, don't flip it and definitely don't throw it again. Okay. Naruto agreed, unsure of how to take her reaction. He reached beneath the side of the van and with little preamble, lifted, using much less strength this time, but he couldn't get a good enough grip and only ended up flipping it over again. Wait, I can do it. Another 3 attempts resulted in the same outcome and Naruto was growing frustrated with his inability to complete what should have been a simple request, at least for someone with superhuman strength. He rounded the front of the currently overturned van and, in his frustration, stomped on the bumper as one would a skateboard, sending it flipping into the air. He caught it in its descent, feeling the weight of the van in his arms and through his body, but it wasn't nearly as heavy as he expected it to be. If he was to guess, the old clunker felt as though it weighed about 100 pounds or so, even though he knew it had to have been more than that. Naruto knew he must have been grinning like an idiot, but he didn't care as the knowledge of his superhuman strength fully processed. Like that? He asked after a moment of internal elation at one of his boyhood dreams having come true. Gwen was once again wide-eyed as she stared at him. Yeah, like that. Try to throw it again, but not at the building this time. Naruto looked about the lot, trying to find a direction in which he wouldn't create even more damage. Finding such a direction, he threw the van, watching as it sailed through the air for a few passing moments before crashing onto the concrete, sliding a ways before finally coming to a stop. That's just not fair, Gwen said, staring in the direction the van was thrown. What's not fair? Naruto asked. Nothing, Gwen muttered with a shake of her head. All right then, well, test your reflexes next. Sure, but how are we gonna? Naruto felt his senses flare and he moved his head to the side before he even realized what he was doing, marginally avoiding the chunk of asphalt shed thrown at him. What the hell was that? Why'd you just throw a? Gwen webbed another piece of asphalt and an actual rock, taking one in each hand, before he could question her sanity. She lobbed both at him with differing speeds and targets. He avoided them, contorting his body, performing a few evasive somersaults, spinning in his leap to do so, all without fully realizing just how he was accomplishing such feats. Reflexes are good, Gwen observed, speaking calmly as if she hadn't just tried to kill him. Strength is even better. All right, let's test your speed next. Oh sure, but first, can we maybe address the fact you just hurled rocks at me? Naruto's words began calmly, as if he was recounting an uneventful weekend, ending in a shout, you could have hit me. Yeah, well, that was kinda the point, Gwen said, offering him not an apology, but rather a shrug and a smirk. And besides, you're a big boy with powers, you probably would have lived. Probably, Naruto deadpanned. Probably, Gwen repeated. Is it the hair? Naruto asked before thinking, because I said I was sorry. With a flick of her wrist and a precarious smile, Gwen had another piece of asphalt in her hand, and this one was bigger than any shed thrown up until that point. No, it wasn't. But now that you've reminded me, I'll give you to the count of 3. I think it's time we test just how fast you can run. You're kidding, right? Naruto asked nervously, taking a step back. 1. Gwen didn't answer him, instead beginning to count. Gwen, Naruto tried, his voice breaking as his senses began to flare in warning. 2. Gwen persisted, tossing and catching the asphalt in her hand leisurely, but her expression was sharp and dangerous, a smirk. Have I ever told you how hot your hair makes you look? Naruto clamored, hearkening back to memories of how his father would appease his mother whenever she was angry. To his surprise, his words had the desired effect of making Gwen pause. The natural pink of her cheeks quickly began to darken and spread across her face, encompassing her freckles. Naruto was almost relieved to see her sputter, interrupting her count up to his demise, as embarrassing as it was for him to admit that aloud. At least his words proved to be the distraction he needed. If only he capitalized on it. Naruto mentally berated himself at the opportunity he squandered, because following her brief lull in concentration, Gwen's wide eyes arrowed in dangerous displays of anger. The hand holding the asphalt reared back as if she were about to pitch a baseball. 3. Oh shit! Naruto was running before he even realized it. His initial run turned into a desperate sprint across the large lot, and he could hear her footsteps resonating close behind him in the form of angry crunches as her feet pounded against the loose gravel. Gwen was quickly gaining on him. His senses forewarned him of the projectile that would have likely shattered his arm had he not avoided it. The thwip of a web shooter was Naruto's only warning. She had reloaded, and he snapped his head to the side, cringing as he heard and felt another rock whizzing by his ear. Naruto realized Gwen would soon catch him, if she didn't outright kill him with a loose piece of gravel first. Thinking as clearly as he could as he ran for his life, Naruto realized being out in the open would do him no good, and he didn't think he could conjure the right words to calm her, so, without any viable option, he banked a hard left, almost falling in the process, and made towards the long-abandoned warehouse. Naruto nearly made it to one of the broken windows when he heard the sound of twin web shooters sound off. His peripherals briefly caught sight of 2 thin strands of webbing shoot both his flanks, attaching to the building he was trying to find refuge in. His senses flared once more, but he did not react fast enough to avoid what impacted him from behind. The world as he saw it spun around, but Naruto felt no real pain, only confusion as he struggled to understand what had happened. Everything spun twice more before righting itself, and he realized he was staring up at Gwen. She had his hands pinned above his head, straddling him from above to keep him from moving. But he had no intention on fighting her. Naruto found himself once more enraptured by the girl above him, the only sound between them being their heavy breathing and the distant clatter of a passing train, small clouds of their condensate crashing against one another in their closeness. Gwen's body felt warm above his own, and Naruto found the weight oddly pleasant. Some part of his rationale recognized just how compromising their position was, but he couldn't focus on anything but her flushed face. Her dirty blonde hair seemed to glow in the narrow light that invaded through the adjacent window, some of those same golden strands sticking to her cheeks from the sweat of her chase. It was then Naruto realized he was well and truly smitten by the cube blonde from another world. Gotcha. Yes. Naruto breathed out, both his eyes and voice dropping down without realizing it. Yes, you did. Naruto couldn't look away from her large blues, and for whatever reason, Gwen had yet to blink, returning his stare. Those same eyes, however, did narrow ever so slightly, and there was something distinctly different about them this time. Before Naruto could lose himself in what this could possibly mean, a sudden shout interrupted them. My cars! As if burned, Gwen jumped off him, using his chest as a launching point, forcefully expelling his breath from him in a gasp. Sorry. Gwen apologized with a wince once she realized what she'd done. She webbed his chest before he could respond, pulling him to his feet. We have to go. Yeah, Naruto wheezed in agreement as he was pulled away by the same web. After being chased away from the warehouse by a vagrant man, they found themselves at a bus stop, taking refuge beneath the glass structure. What did ya know? I guess you were right, Gwen chuckled as she patted both her skirt and the pants she wore beneath free of dust. Yeah, well, it happens from time to time, Naruto said, following a laugh of her own. Well, all that aside, Gwen began as she allowed herself to fall back onto the bench, I am kind of surprised by the extent of your powers. What do you mean? Naruto asked, taking a seat beside her, keeping two arm rests between them. He looked up to the gray sky through the glass structure ponderously. He was warm from his previous actives, but it really was cold, and if he recalled correctly, snow was forecasted. It wasn't rain, but it was close enough to remind him of what had happened the day before. His elation abandoned him immediately. For starters, your reflexes are on par with mine, though you are a little slower. Gwen began following a thoughtful hum. She interlaced her hands behind her head, staring up at the sky above as well. Your strength, on the other hand. Well, you're definitely stronger than me. I've had to pick up overturned cars before and I somewhat struggled with it. You went and tossed it like it was nothing. It actually kinda pisses me off. Naruto decidedly ignored her final sentence, feeling his pride as a man swell at her praise, and yet, his thoughts were elsewhere. Hey Gwen. Yeah? Gwen acknowledged, turning to regard him. Do you think we have time to go to his funeral? Naruto asked demurely. It's today but he didn't continue. Gwen was silent for a time as well, her expression falling into a mask of stoicism as she returned her attention to the sky above. We've got a lot of ground to cover if we're going to get you ready to take on Kingpin, not to mention I still need to get you a pair of web shooters and a suit, she said, looking to him again, but I suppose it wouldn't hurt to pay our respects. Thank you, Gwen, Naruto said earnestly. She placed both hands at her sides and looked away, following an old truck that puttered by. Don't thank me yet. I don't plan on taking it easy on you just because you're new to this. We don't have much time before Kingpin gets that collider up and running. We can go, but we have to make it quick. Naruto nodded, palming the flash drive in his pocket. Recalling his promise to Spider-Man, he already decided he would do anything and everything in his power to keep them, even if he was afraid of the coming consequences of his word. His phone began to ring within his pocket, interrupting the heavy and very much awkward silence that lingered between them. Naruto glanced at it and felt a greater fear lance through his stomach like a concentrated gust of cold air. Oh shit, what is it? Gwen asked, leaning over his shoulder to look at his phone. It was his mother. She's going to kill me. Naruto hissed between grit teeth. He had not been in contact with her in more than 2 days. Realign his record of a measly 8 hours. His phone showed well over 50 missed calls, an equal number of voicemails, and triple the amount of text messages yet. Oh, is Whittle Foxy scared of his mommy? Gwen mocked. You don't know her like I do. Naruto didn't rise to her taunts, his tone even and serious. He had much more pertinent things to worry about. If I don't get into contact with her soon, she's liable to have the whole Brooklyn Police Department looking for me. Ah, she wouldn't actually do that, would she? Gwen asked, following a forced chuckle. Oh, she definitely would. When my old man was alive, he was the police commissioner for the Brooklyn PD. She still has contacts, and believe me, she'll use them. She's done it before, Naruto said. Oh, so you fathers. Gwen trailed off. I am sorry to hear that, Naruto. Thanks, Naruto said, offering a strained smile. He had not intended on revealing the fact. It's been 2 years now. It sucks, but it is what it is. Tragedy seems to follow us, Gwen whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear her. He did, however, pretend he hadn't. Are you planning on telling your mother about your powers? Gwen asked after a heavy lull in their conversation. No, Naruto answered immediately with an accompanying shake of his head. Spider-Man said not to, and I understand why. Beyond that, knowing my mom, she'd throw a fit before permanently grounding me, which she'll probably do anyway considering, well, no, there's no way she'd ever let me be. But he couldn't finish his thought process. He was still more than hesitant to refer to himself as Spider-Man. Right, so what are you going to do now? Gwen asked. Face the music, Naruto said after releasing a long and heavy sigh. At least that's how I think the expression goes. How can you face, anyway? The last thing we need is for the cops to be looking for me while we train. I'll have to think of something to get her off my back. Do you have anything in mind? Gwen asked. Nope, Naruto admitted, popping the last syllable. Well, at least not right now, but I am sure I'll think of something. I guess we'll postpone training for now, Gwen said, standing to her feet. In the meantime, I'll try and secure you a temporary suit and some web shooters. Ooh, something orange, Naruto said, taking a break from his conservation. Well, if you can, that is. It's kinda my favorite color. Orange, huh? Gwen hummed again. I'll see what I can do. No guarantees, obviously. You're the best. Naruto said just before his phone began to ring. Oh boy, I'd better get going now. I've got your number and you have mine. I guess I'll meet you later. Sounds like a plan, Gwen agreed. Oh, and Naruto, just be careful out there. Naruto wasn't given a chance to respond because Gwen was already on the move, running into a nearby alleyway. Before he could question as to why she would do that, she re-emerged a moment later in a white and black spider suit, complete with a hoodie lined in pink. He watched on, awestruck as she swung by, giving him a passing salute before disappearing behind a nearby building. Holy shit, she's so cool, Naruto muttered to himself, waving idly in the direction Gwen had gone. Another phone call shook him from his stupor. Naruto sent his mother a text message announcing his upcoming arrival and made the active choice to ignore the following flurry of calls and messages until he arrived home. He had the keys to their apartment in hand, but his trepidation kept him from opening it. The choice was made for him as his instincts flared a second before the door swung open, revealing his mother. She was absolutely furious. Where have you been? Before, Naruto was feeling apprehensive facing his mother after ignoring her for 2 days. Now, as she stood before him, he was immediately reminded of just what he had to lose should he decide to continue down the path in which he was already on. Naruto entered, bypassing her rant to hug his mother tightly, mindful of his newfound strength. "En Naruto?" Kushina muttered. Bewildered, she hugged him back regardless. "I am sorry I missed your calls," Naruto whispered, tightening his hold on Kushina. "It's just that, it's been a rough couple of days." Kushina pulled back and stared up at him with an understanding but firm expression. "I understand, but Naruto, don't let it happen again," she warned, wagging a finger at him. "I want," Naruto said, but he couldn't promise her anything, so he didn't. Instead, he offered his mother a smile, the best he could conjure in that moment. "Good," Kushina huffed, crossing her arms. She looked up at him once more, her eyes narrowing slightly. "That aside, have you gotten taller?" His mother wasn't exactly short, but neither was she tall, and before being bitten, he only eclipsed her by a couple of inches if he stood with a proper posture. Now, he was well over a head taller than her. "I think I hit another growth spur," Naruto offered weakly. "I honestly don't know. I kinda woke up like this." Kushina hummed suspiciously at his explanation as she continued to scrutinize him. "Oh, well, have you been working out as well? You seem, I don't know, broader too?" "Oh yak now." He palmed the back of his head with a nervous chuckle. "Been doing some push-ups and sit-ups recently. We've also started lifting weights in gym class." "Well, be careful," Kushina cautioned, finally smiling at him. "I don't want you getting hurt." "Will do, Mom," Naruto agreed, allowing his hands to fall into his pockets. He was reluctant about what he needed to ask next. "So, Spider-Man's funeral's today and I was maybe hoping I could go." Kushina looked outright ready to deny him, briefly scowling as she'd done many times before whenever he mentioned his hero. Something stayed her usual rant, regarding him with reluctant consideration. This was at the very least promising because normally, whenever he asked his mother if he could do something or go anywhere, she would immediately refuse unless it was school-related. He only rarely managed to convince her otherwise once her mind was set, and on the few times he had, came at the cost of her smothering supervision. "I know he was important to you," Kushina began slowly, as if considering her words, "but you do realize just how many people will be in attendance?" "Yeah, more than half the city," Naruto answered somberly. "Yes, half the city," Kushina parroted tersely. "It's not likely you'd be able to get close enough for it to matter." It would matter to him. Naruto felt an ugly sense of anger flare at his mother's callous words, but he couldn't outright deny her reasoning. Though he felt he owed it to Spider-Man to at the very least attend his funeral. He may not have known him personally, but his father evidently did. He briefly considered revealing his father's connection to Spider-Man, but to do so would also mean revealing just how he'd come to discover that truth, a truth he wondered whether or not his mother was aware of, and if she were, her hatred of Spider-Man would either make complete sense, or none at all. Despite his current frustration with his mother, Naruto did still very much love her, and there was a strong part of him that wanted nothing more than to tell her everything he was going through, to confess that he was just bitten by a radioactive spider, making him very much like the man she appeared to hate. But he could never do that. His mother was both incredibly strict and affectionate, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to pretend it didn't bother him. Though Naruto understood she had her reasons, at times her devotion could be suffocating, and if he were to reveal his new powers, He wasn't likely to see the light of day until he was 18 twice over. But at the end of the day, despite her flaws, Kushina was his mother, his world. There was no one more important to him and nothing he wouldn't do to protect her. Even if that meant deceiving her. Please Mom, Naruto pleaded tiredly. I know how you feel, how you felt about Spider-Man, but I want to be there, even if I can't get close. Kushina was silent another stretch before finally relenting with a drawn-out sigh. Fine, you can go, but I am going with you, she stipulated. Thank you, Mom. Naruto accepted his mother's conditions with a sigh concealed as a nasal exhale. Don't you go thank me just yet, young man, Kushina began, her expression returning to its earlier suspicious disposition. The day before yesterday I received a particular call from Vision informing me my son skipped class, and don't you dare try to use Spider-Man as an excuse. The news didn't break until late that night. Mind explaining yourself, mister? Naruto had forgotten the fact and on the spot, struggled to come up with a proper excuse other than one based on a kernel of truth. You see, there's this girl. A girl? Kushina immediately cut in, taking a step into his personal space. What girl? If you just let me finish, Naruto couldn't help but bite out. I was working on a project when I accidentally got some super glue on my hand. Yeah, on my way to wash it off, I accidentally bumped into a girl and kinda got my hand stuck in her hair. After we got free I was super embarrassed so I hid back in my room for the day. Sorry I didn't mention it earlier. Kushina hummed as she continued to keep him pinned down with her stare, calculating blue eyes locked on his own, daring him to lie. Okay then, what about the night before? She questioned. What? Was his unintelligent response. Naruto very much expected a follow-up question, just not that one. I was also informed on that phone call that you and Miles were seen out past your curfew 2 days ago, Kushina informed him. Naruto didn't have an immediate rebuttal or lie to explain that, at least not one that would get him out of the corner his mother backed him into. We went to meet his uncle, he finally admitted. Miles' uncle? Are we talking about the same uncle that? Kushina trailed off, appearing truly concerned instead of angry. Is his name Eren? She asked. It is, actually, Naruto said, surprised his mother knew. Perhaps he should be considering Miles' father knew his own. I won't ground you this time because you are being honest with me, but I want you to listen to me clearly, Naruto. You are, under no circumstances, to associate yourself with that man ever again. Am I clear? Kushina demanded. Yeah, sure, but why? Naruto asked curiously. You know Eren? I won't go into details for respect for Miles, but let's just say he's had more than a few encounters with the police, Kushina admitted reluctantly. He seemed like a pretty cool guy, though, Naruto said. What did he do? Just promise me you won't see that man, or sneak off like that again, Kushina demanded, or cut contact with me for as long as you did. Naruto scarcely restrained a sigh, knowing his mother was fully aware and was playing on the weight of his word. I promise. He lied and it hurt him to do it. He could keep his promise to stay away from Eren easily enough, but if he was going to be Spider-Man, or at least protect his family and the city like Spider-Man, there'd be times in which he would inevitably have to sneak away, something that was going to be incredibly difficult, he was now beginning to realize. Thank you, Naruto, Kushina said, gathering him into another embrace. Her head rested on his chest, her arms wrapped tightly around him in a meaningful way. I know I can be pushy sometimes and you may find my rules annoying, but I am only trying to do what's best for you. I love you. I know Mom, Naruto said, returning the gesture just as tightly, knowing that much was true. His mother was many things but a liar was not one of them, and that's what made lying to her that much more taxing on him. A quick internet search revealed the time and place of Spider-Man's service. Naruto decided to wear a dark gray jacket over a simple black button-up. He didn't own anything else that would be appropriate for a service as the last funeral he attended was his own father's and had grown since then. Naruto sent Gwen a message briefly calling off their meeting considering his mother would be coming along, and they were off. Spider-Man's chosen final resting place was a quaint New York cemetery that had quickly become overcrowded by a grieving city. Thankfully they had the foresight to hail a cab instead of driving because they had to abandon their ride nearly halfway there due to the denser than usual traffic. They walked the rest of the way in complete silence. The crowds were massive and with traffic at a standstill, the NYPD had to step in to mitigate masses. What Naruto found both surprising and touching was that despite the large gathering of people, it was oddly quiet. The sounds of the city were ever present, such as the thrum of idling vehicles and distant speech coalesced into unintelligible yet distinctly dour ambience. "This way," Naruto said, taking his mother's hand in his to push past the sea of mourners donning Spider-Man masks of varying quality and tear-stained eyes. They had made it into the thick of the crowd within the cemetery, nearing as close to the service as they could when suddenly Naruto felt his senses flare to life. He stopped mid-step, idly feeling his mother bump into him from behind. He was immediately on alert. Keeping his mother close behind him, he ignored both her efforts to pull away and the calling of his name as he searched the sea of faces for any possible signs of danger. That's when he saw a large and intimidating-looking bald man wearing heavy and spiked leathers, more than any one person rightly should, with a spider's web on his bare head. He towered amongst a group of other, similarly dressed and dangerous-looking men. He seemed to be staring at him, and for a moment, Naruto speculated the man may be one of Kingpin's people. He tensed as the man reached into his coat for something and pushed his mother further behind him, ready to act should the need arise. But it didn't, because the man pulled out a box of tissues which he used to wipe the tears in his eyes. Naruto blinked as he watched the other men swarm him, offering hushed words of comfort as they led the now openly bawling man away. Standing in his place was an admittedly cute girl that immediately caught his attention for reasons beyond her initial looks. She was short in stature and looked to be of Asian descent. Her hair was jet black, reaching just beneath her pink cheeks, with a tuft falling in between her large brown eyes. She wore a black vest over a white short-sleeved dress shirt and a black tie. Beneath that was a short checkered skirt with red and blue intersecting lines. A pair of girls' boots, black in color with vibrant red laces, and socks with a matching color scheme, black with 3 red lines near the top. She wore a girl's uniform from which he couldn't associate with any school, reinforced by the teal backpack she wore. Naruto wasn't sure exactly what it was about the girl beyond her looks that caught his attention, but found he couldn't look away. They maintained eye contact with one another through the distance and heavy crowds until a particular dense grouping of people pushed past him. When they cleared, the girl was gone. "Found you." Naruto, nearly startled at the familiar voice, and turned to see Gwen approaching, still wearing her vision uniform. That's when he realized that while his senses picked up on something, it didn't exactly feel dangerous. She must have been who he sensed, but being new to the sensation, it was rather difficult to fully distinguish friend or foe in the moment. "Oh, hey, Gwen." Naruto greeted her, only to remember too late he was still holding his mother's stand and immodestly let go. "Who's this now?" Kushina asked, finally making it to his side, briefly tossing him an odd look. "Oh, this is," Naruto trailed, unsure of how to explain who Gwen was. She never texted him back, so he simply assumed she was still busy finding him a suit. "Gwendolyn Stacy." Gwen introduced herself easily, offering Kushina her hand. "I am a friend from Vision. We have a few classes together." They had one, but Naruto wasn't about to correct her. "Funny, Naruto's never mentioned you," Kushina said, accepting the girl's outstretched hand. "Well, I am new to Vision," Gwen stated easily and charismatic. "Naruto here's been showing me around. Oh, he also did this to me," she finished, closing her eyes with a smile to point to the side of her head where his hand had gotten stuck. Naruto flustered at the reminder. "I said I was sorry." "Yak now, I don't think you ever did," Gwen said, smirking at him as soon as his mother's attention snapped to him. "Naruto Namikaze," Kushina began, staring at him sternly. "You glued your hand to her hair and you didn't even apologize? Do you not understand the importance of a woman's hair? Did I not raise you better?" "Ah." Naruto took a cautious step back as he struggled for a way out from beneath his mother's scrutiny. "Yes, Naruto, why is that?" Gwen said, standing at his mother's side, crossing her arms to match Kushina's stance. She subtly mouthed the words payback at him. Coincidentally, he was saved by the beginning of the service. At the front of the small church, on a stage, stood a beautiful woman with vibrant red hair. Naruto recognized her to be Mary Jane Parker, Spider-Man's widow. Any embarrassment he was feeling in that moment was replaced by guilt and grief, a feeling amplified by the presence of the older woman standing beside and behind Mary Jane. Naruto knew her to be Spider-Man's aunt, May Parker. Both were solemn, the pain of their loss still fresh, and it was a feeling he could never forget. Naruto said nothing else throughout the entirety of the ceremony, listening as Mary Jane spoke fondly of her husband, recounting briefly of how they met. Their story was an adorable one. The tale of how the nerdy kid charmed the cheerleader. One thing Naruto found interesting was the fact Mary Jane hardly mentioned her husband's tenure as Spider-Man. She spoke only of the man Peter B. Parker was. She ended the eulogy by thanking all of those who had attended, and to those who also mourned their loss. Naruto? Gwen Soft's voice called him from his side. Naruto had pocketed both his hands as he watched the slideshow of Peter B. Parker and his accomplishments displayed on the large screen erected behind the stage Mary Jane and May Parker once occupied. He could feel his mother wrap an arm around one of his, tugging at it gently, but he stayed in place. Naruto, I think it's time to go, Kushina said softly, tugging a little harder. It's starting to snow. I know, Naruto mumbled. I'll see you later, Naruto, Gwen said, patting his back. After prompt goodbyes, Naruto and his mother headed home. The trip was traveled in silence, and when they arrived, he went straight to his room. Feeling both emotionally and physically drained, he fell asleep relatively quickly. In what felt like a blink of the eye, he woke up, wide-eyed and wired. Before Naruto realized what was happening, he was seated, staring at his window. Waving back at him through the frosted glass, sporting something of a grin, was Gwen. It took him far longer than he would have liked to realize why that should have been possible. He lived on the 8th floor of a high-rise. It wasn't until Gwen knocked on his window, an expectant expression on her face, that Naruto remembered everything that had transpired in the past days. He jumped out of bed and rushed to open his window, letting her in. In doing so, he was blasted by a biting breeze, causing him to shiver. Nice room you got here, Foxy, Gwen said in a whisper as she tossed a brown paper bag onto his bed, taking a falling seat onto it as well. Thanks, Naruto muttered, glancing outside the window before shutting it following a shiver. His room was faintly illuminated by distant neighboring buildings, allowing him to see Gwen up close in her suit. Her suit was a one-piece, comprised primarily of 3 contrasting colors. The upper part of her suit was white with a pink background to the gray webbing beneath along her arms, elbows, and along the inside of her hood. The lower half of her suit was all black and of a reflective material, the color spiking up to her breast, revealing a faint triangular weave design present throughout the entire suit. You just gonna openly check me out like that? Gwen asked, crossing her arms to conceal the last place had been staring. Naruto was as much of a boy, man he preferred to think, as anyone else, but he truly was admiring her suit's design, not the body it contoured to, at least not that time, though there was no way she would know that. "And nice shoes," Naruto blurted out, his eyes quickly falling to the blue dancer shoes. Shit, I mean, I was looking at your suit, it's really cool. I swear I wasn't. Keep it down. Gwen shushed him. I was just messing with you. Geez, you're really easy to rile up, yak now? Naruto trailed off, realizing she was correct, and only sighed as he took a seat beside Gwen, though with enough distance so as not to invite any further opportunities for her to embarrass him. He snatched his phone from his nightstand to look at the time. It's 3:42 in the morning. What are you doing here? Well, just so you know, crime never sleeps, so get ready to do the same, Gwen said with a smirk, palming the paper bag at her side. Not sleep. That is, now I find a good cup of coffee always helps, or energy drinks, if you're a degenerate, she said, glancing at the green and black cans near his computer. Haha, yeah, Naruto agreed with a grimace. Anyway, Gwen continued, presenting him the paper bag, I got you a little something. Naruto felt his heart jump in his chest. Is that a... Dude, we're in your house, Gwen said, pressing a finger to his lips. Why is it that I have to remind you to keep it down? I mean, what would your mother say if she found her precious baby boy alone in a room with a girl? Naruto's blush at Gwen's previous action abandoned, leaving him contrastingly pale, and he tensed at the thought. After killing you, he muttered, shed kill me. Right, I am not even going down that rabbit hole, Gwen said with a shake of her head. Anyways, I managed to find you something. It's not much given that I am kinda stuck in another universe with a credit card and a bus pass that don't work, but I think it should work for now. Naruto opened the bag with great anticipation, only for his face to fall immediately. He cleared his throat to find his voice. You're kidding me, right? He opened the bag to find a small foam fox mask within. He picked it up slowly, holding it by the thin white strip, before looking up to find Gwen wearing her own mask of amusement, grinning widely and only barely restraining her giggles. No, I thought it'd be fitting, Gwen said with humor in her voice. You did say you wanted something orange. Well yeah, but this won't even cover my whole face, Naruto muttered. You won't know unless you try, Gwen said, fluttering her eyes at him. Come on, put it on, I tried really hard to find this. With a sigh and a great deal of disbelief, Naruto slipped the mask over his head, feeling as though he probably looked as dumb as he felt. Was this really the best you could find? His answer came in the form of a sudden flash, momentarily blinding him in the dark room. When his vision finally returned to him, he found Gwen's grinning face glowing in the light of her phone. That's a keeper, Gwen said in an excited whisper. Naruto felt his face burn behind the ridiculous mask. Hey, you can't do that, delete it. You need to keep it. Gwen was in the middle of shushing him again when both their attentions snapped to the door. Rapidly approaching footsteps warned them of something incoming. Shit, Naruto panicked. Gwen snatched the mask from his face and pushed him into bed, a gloved hand covering his mouth as her face hovered dangerously close to his, her hair tickling his forehead. Play it cool, she instructed. With a flick of her wrist, she pulled herself to the ceiling, hanging on with both her hands and feet behind her. She webbed the edge of his covers, which had been haphazardly tossed aside earlier, pulling them over Naruto, to cover him just as the door burst open, revealing Kushina with a wooden baseball bat in hand. She quickly scanned the room, looking for something. Where is she? Someone, what? Naruto muttered, acting as he had just been awoken. I clearly heard a girl's voice in here, there's no doubt about it, Kushina said, moving quickly to his closet. What? No mom, I was watching a video before I fell asleep and I accidentally played it when I was checking the time, Naruto said, verbally weaving the first story that came to mind. And you were talking to your phone? Kushina asked. Her voice sounded muffled from the closet to accompany the sound of hangers sliding and crashing against one another, because I clearly heard your voice too. I was talking to myself, Naruto said, briefly glancing up at Gwen, her attention on the closet. You know, I am kinda weird like that. Kushina appeared from within the closet, the slugger now resting on her shoulder, every bit the picture of the mother of a mobster. She hummed as she looked about the room, approaching his bed to peek beneath it. That is true, she said, following a hum, walking to his bedside to run the bat along the underside of his bed. Yak now, you didn't have to agree so easily, Naruto muttered. Are you sure there wasn't a girl in here? Kushina asked, ignoring his words. The voice sounded so clear, she said as she approached his window, opening it to look outside. Mom, it's snowing outside and we're on the 8th floor, where could I possibly be hiding a girl? Naruto said, hoping dearly his mother wouldn't look up as he was. He could see Gwen's attention was on his mother, and if for no other reason, he was glad they had high ceilings. Could ya close the window? It's cold, Naruto urged. Kushina hummed again, seemingly focused on something outside before she finally shut the window. What video were you watching? Naruto wasn't expecting that question, even though he probably should have. As such, he had no immediate answer. A playthrough. What playthrough? Kushina immediately asked, tapping the bat against her shoulder in a way he found unsettling. I don't remember. Look, it was one I was watching before I fell asleep, Naruto said, growing exasperated at his mother's continued line of questioning. I closed out of it and was about to go back to sleep before you barged in, swinging a freaking bat. Was it one of those videos? Kushina questioned, pointing the bat at him briefly before returning it to her shoulder. I know you're getting to that age where you're interested in. Mom! Naruto shouted, his voice rising to a higher octave and his face burning as he tried his hardest not to look up at Gwen. His sensitive hearing revealed her muffled nose exhales, indicating the humor she found in the situation. We're not having this discussion at 3 in the morning. Now, Naruto, I know it may be hard for you, not having your father around to discuss these things, Kushina began slowly, but just know that I am here for you, if you ever have any questions regarding your body. Naruto shot out of bed with a speed that surprised even himself. Swiveling behind his mother, he began to usher her out of his room. I am tired and I want to go back to bed. You should too. You've got work and I've got school tomorrow. Okay. Well, postpone this for now, but again, I am here if you ever want to talk, Kushina offered as she allowed herself to be pushed out of his room. No, well, never speak of this again. Good night, Mom, Naruto said, quickly shutting the door in her face. Good night, my precious fox, Kushina sang from behind the door. Naruto's head fell, his forehead thumping loudly against his door, and it remained there as he listened to his mother's light and retreating footsteps. Gwen dropped down graciously beside him with a barely audible thump. So that was something. There was amused sympathy in her voice and it only added to his embarrassment. Please don't tell anyone, Naruto whispered, his face still firmly planted on the door. Who would I tell? Gwen offered with a shrug of her shoulders before taking a seat on his bed once more. All that aside, your real suit's still in here. That broke Naruto from his shameful stupor. Real suit? He asked, turning to look at her from over his shoulder. While this certainly made for a fun prank and a great reminder, Gwen began, swinging the cheap fox mask around her finger. I don't expect you to go swinging around the city in this in your pajamas. Now look inside. Naruto made sure to lock his door before returning to her side. He watched as she overturned the bag, dropping a red and blue pile onto the bed. Is this another joke? He asked cautiously. No more jokes, Gwen said, holding up the suit. I got this from a costume store. It was the last one they had and it was expensive. So, yak now, you're welcome. Yeah, but it's got fake muscles on it, Naruto pointed out pitifully, indicating to the padded biceps and abs. It's also about your size and has a mask that seems durable enough, and it's officially licensed, Gwen added, throwing it at him, and most importantly, it'll work for now. I guess, Naruto muttered, feeling somewhat disheartened to find no orange in the suit whatsoever. Suit up, we're going out for some practice, Gwen said, standing to her feet. Before Naruto could question as to what she meant, he reflexively caught a pair of white cuffs she tossed at him. No way, Naruto quietly gushed, are these web shooters? Yeah, it's my backup set. Now just a heads up, they're an earlier model so they're a little worn and more sensitive than my current web shooters but auto-adjust for size, so they should fit you, Gwen said. Naruto looked up to Gwen before standing, reversing their roles. Thank you, Gwen, he said sincerely. Gwen turned away, moving towards his window, putting on her mask again. Don't mention it, now suit up and remember to wear something warm and flexible beneath and meet me on the roof. Naruto watched her go, feeling his heart beat loudly in his chest and he wasn't sure it could all be credited to the anticipation. After all, it was thanks to Gwen that he was now one step closer to fulfilling his promise to Spider-Man. Naruto stepped out into the chill of the early morning, shivering not only because it was cold but also because of his innate fear of heights. It didn't help that it had been snowing all night, blanketing the fire escape in a slick layer of snow. Oh boy. Here we go. Naruto tried to encourage himself, his hand gripping the railing with enough force to mold the steel around his fingers. One by one excruciating floor, he ascended the narrow and shaky metal stairs until he finally made it to the roof where he found Gwen seated atop the elevator roof in trance, her masked face illuminated by the light of her phone. Do you want me to text you a copy? Gwen asked with a chuckle, turning her phone to show the picture Shed taken earlier. Naruto flinched at the image, seeing Shed in fact already made it her wallpaper. Would you delete it if I ask nicely? I can even add a cherry if it'll help my case, he pleaded. Nope, Gwen immediately denied, locking and pocketing her phone somewhere in the collar of her suit. What took you so long anyways? Naruto briefly wondered where the phone sat in her suit but decided to focus on her question. Yeah, well, I've never really been good with heights, and it doesn't help the stairs are covered in snow. You do know you have the ability to stick to virtually any surface, remember? Gwen pointed out. A little snow should affect you as long as your feet are firmly planted to the ground. I'll be sure to implement that once I know how to control it, Naruto retorted. I nearly tore the ceiling apart in my dorm the other day. You also ruined my hair, Gwen said, falling from her perch to stand before him with hands on her hips. Naruto would have liked to strongly disagree with that statement, but he didn't want to test Gwen's patience on the roof of a 12-story high-rise, especially not after her previous reactions to his comments. Right, so how do I control that? He asked. You just do, Gwen said, walking back to the rooftop entranceway, then vertically up the surface, coming to a stop midway. She stared at him expectantly through the expressive large eyes of her mask. Yeah, I am gonna need you to be a little more specific than that, Naruto urged. So far I've only stuck to things by accident, or when I am stressed, or at least that's what it seems like. I am not gonna lie to you and pretend to know exactly how it works, Gwen began, crossing her arms, but I know how I do it, it's just kinda hard to put into words. What do you mean? Naruto asked as he approached where Gwen stood horizontally. I guess just act like it's natural, Gwen said, tilting her head, the eyes of her mask narrowing as if in thought. Yak now. Like how you can control your own breathing when you want to if you think about it. Naruto was now actively aware of his breathing, taking over from his natural instincts, but his attention was primarily on her mask, his own rudimentary one, hopefully concealing his reaction. "Whoa, how did you get your mask's eyes to move like that?" he asked excitedly. "One thing at a time, Naruto," Gwen said. "Again, treat it like a normal body function, or maybe something you do every day. Walk up to the wall, expecting you stick, and you should stick, and when you want to let go, just let go," she finished, flipping off the entryway, landing in a crouched position. She was so cool. Naruto cleared his throat to keep his composure. "So basically I am supposed to believe in myself?" he surmised. "Pretty much," Gwen said, shrugging her shoulders. "It's important not to panic, though, or you might lose concentration and fall, or continue to stick when you don't want to. Yak now, like you did with my hair. Are you ever gonna let that go?" "I did say I was sorry." Naruto, out of habit, palmed the back of his head. "I really do like the way it looks. Yak now." "Just stick to the wall," Gwen ordered, thumbing in the direction of the wall shed just dismounted. Naruto chose to do as he was asked because, being as cautious as he was with heights, he felt as though knowing how to stick to walls could very well save his life, especially if he was to try web swinging, which he was and wasn't looking forward to. Like breathing, Naruto repeated to himself, pressing a foot to the wall. When he applied weight to his single foot, it slid down as one would expect. "Remember, make yourself believe you can do it," Gwen said, moving closer to him, "because you can do this, Naruto." "Right, I can do this," Naruto repeated, placing his foot against the wall once again, truly believing it would stick. He felt a smile split his face, feeling his foot stick to the wall through his shoe, not budging even when he pulled down or away. "Holy shit, I am doing it." "Good, now your other foot. Remember, don't panic if you feel like you're about to fall, because you won't. Your superhuman strength should allow you to stand without falling on your ass," Gwen said, coming even closer to his side to place a hand on his back. "If nothing else, I won't let you fall." "Got it, thanks," Naruto breathed out, feeling warmth bloom within him at her touch. He slightly shook as he tried to find a way to lift his other foot, which was currently supporting all his weight. Slowly, he did just that, before quickly placing it beside his other foot. "Look, Gwen, I am doing it." "I see that," Gwen said, laughing alongside him. She continued to keep a hand on his back in support. "Now try walking up a little. Do it just like you would if you were walking down the street." Naruto took a few calming breaths, feeling his heart racing loudly in his chest in equal parts excitement and trepidation. He tentatively raises his right foot, feeling it come loose just as he hoped it would. Doing as Gwen recommended, he moved his left foot forward, sticking, then his right, and so on without any problems until he ran out of wall. "This is so cool," Naruto said with a cheer as he turned around and walked back down the wall, and then up again, repeating this a few more times before stopping midway. "It really is easy. You do catch on pretty quickly," Gwen praised. "With that out of the way, let's practice some web swinging." Naruto fell on his back with a thud, sinking into the snow. For as long as he was a fan of Spider-Man, Naruto always imagined himself swinging through the New York skyline, maybe saving a cute girl from peril while doing so. But there was one thing he failed to consider, and that was exactly what that entailed. It was all he could think about now, the idea of jumping from a building, swinging hundreds of feet in the air. It made him extremely nervous. He regarded Gwen, who was looking down at him where had fallen with arms crossed and a masked eye pitched inquisitively. "You okay?" she asked. "We're going to practice web swinging here?" Naruto asked, still laying in the snow, "like right now?" "Well, yeah. Where else would we practice?" Gwen asked. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe some low-hanging trees?" Naruto suggested. "I'd even be okay with a street light." "Are you really that afraid of heights?" Gwen asked with what sounded to be genuine concern. "No more than anyone else, I guess. It's just that, well, we're really high up and I don't want to know what'll happen to me if I fall," Naruto said. "It'll give you that," Gwen said as she rounded him. With a flick of her wrist, she webbed his chest to pull him to his feet. "Well, find smaller buildings to start with. Maybe go back to the industrial district, and get you started in a warehouse or something. It's how I learned." "You learned inside a warehouse and you wanted me to start from up here?" Naruto muttered. "We don't exactly have the luxury of time, Naruto," Gwen stated seriously. "And speaking of time, we'll have to worry about swinging lessons later. If I heard correctly, your mother works early in the morning, right?" "Yeah, what about it?" Naruto asked. I am guessing she says goodbye to you before going to work. Maybe the two of you have breakfast together. Catch my drift? Gwen continued. I guess that means our practice'll have to wait until tomorrow then? Naruto concluded. That and I've been up for a long time and I am getting kinda tired. I'd like to get in at least a few hours before we continue with your training, Gwen said. But there is one thing I want to test before I go. Oh yeah, what's? Naruto's senses flared to life just in time to bring his right forearm, blocking Gwen's sudden kick aimed at his head. He grunted in pain and slid in the snow from the sheer force of the attack, his arm immediately throbbing in pain. What the hell? Naruto shouted, shaking his aching arm. That really hurt. Your enemies won't take it easy on you, Naruto, and neither will I, Gwen said as she took on a fighting stance, feet apart, arms up. Naruto also put his arms up, almost mimicking her stance, but he hadn't the faintest idea of what he was actually doing. Shouldn't you teach me something, first? Again, don't know how to fight here. Follow your instincts, Gwen said before running at him. That tells me nothing. Naruto yelped as he tried his best to dodge the flurry of fists and feet lobbed at him. He was successful for the most part, and it almost felt as though his own body was moving on its own accord, yet he knew that not to be case. After what felt like an eternity fighting for his life, which involved no actual fighting on his end, Naruto was finally allowed a reprieve. In avoiding a spinning kick, he managed to perform a backwards flip, once again surprising himself by landing on the elevator entryway in a crouch. Thankfully, Gwen did not continue her onslaught. Exactly what was that supposed to accomplish? Naruto asked through rough nasal exhales. He wasn't exactly tired, simply winded and in continued disbelief at her brazen attack. You were supposed to try and fight back, not just run away, Gwen said, crossing her arms. Yeah, but how? How many times do I have to tell you? I don't know how to fight. Naruto exclaimed with arms outstretched in exasperation. You can't just start swinging at me and expect me to know what to do. Fair enough. Gwen relented with a sigh. I did have more time to figure it out myself, but hey, at least you were able to dodge most of my attacks, so that's something I guess. Yeah, Naruto agreed following a nervous chuckle. He didn't want to admit that he wasn't consciously in control of his actions. Then I guess there isn't much more we can do tonight. Really, I only came here to give you your suit, Gwen said, checking her phone again. I'd see you at school tomorrow, but I probably won't be going back. I only enrolled to find you. With that, Naruto was reminded that Gwen was from another universe. Do you miss your world? He asked, and only then realized just how muted everything sounded with the snow that layered everything around. The large eyes of Gwen's mask fell until nearly half-lidded. What brought this on? She asked lowly. I imagine you have friends and family waiting for you back home. Maybe a boyfriend too. Naruto continued while selfishly and even more childishly yet hoping that was not the case. Gwen turned away. I do miss my mom and my dad. It's why it might seem like I am pushing you so much. I am sorry, Naruto, but I do want to get back home and you're the only one who can help me. But he didn't want her to go. Naruto realized he was behaving irrational and more than likely hormonal, but he really did like Gwen, so much so, he knew he had to help her return, even if that meant seeing her go. It would be selfish to do otherwise. I understand, and he did because he couldn't imagine being separated from his mother, especially after knowing the pain of being forever separated from his father. Naruto removed his mask to more personally address her despite her keeping her back to him. Gwen, no matter what happens, I promise I'll do everything I can to get you back home. Gwen stared silently off into the night and Naruto wondered if maybe he was being too forward in expressing himself. That was before she glanced at him from over her shoulder. Thank you, Naruto, she said in just above a whisper. Naruto watched her approach the ledge, ready to leave, but he wasn't ready for her to leave. Guess I'll be seeing you later then? He called out after. I'll call you sometime after you are done with school. That should give me time to get some rest and maybe some more information on Kingpin before we make our next move, Gwen said. Naruto wanted to ask exactly what that entailed, but what she said next gave him pause. And by the way, I don't have a boyfriend, Gwen said before jumping, disappearing into the darkness of the distance. Morning came in a blink of the eye. Naruto felt as though his head just hit his pillow before his alarm sounded off, waking up from a dreamless and all too short sleep. He was in the middle of dressing himself, ensuring he was wearing his cheap suit beneath his uniform when his mother's breakfast beckoned him. After having not eaten anything for almost 2 days, he was more than hungry. Sleep well? Kushina asked with a chipper smile. She appeared to be perfectly well rested and in high spirits. Naruto stared at his mother with an empty expression, his hair thoroughly groomed by his bed, with his eyes red and heavy from lingering fatigue. She, on the other hand, was dressed in her business attire, a gray suit with a matching knee-high skirt, hair neatly tied in a neat pony's tail, ready to face the world. Meanwhile, he wanted nothing more than to fall face first into his pillow and sleep for at least a couple of days. Considering you burst into my room at 3 in the morning, swinging a bat, I could use a few more hours. Any chance I could convince you to let me stay home today? Naruto asked fruitlessly, knowing the answer already. Considering you weren't supposed to leave Vision in the first place, no, Kushina denied. Fair enough, I guess. Naruto, who was far too tired to argue, relented, instead digging into his breakfast with a healthy hunger. I didn't get to tell you yesterday, but I've got to go in early today. Can I trust you to make it to Vision by yourself today? Kushina asked. Taking a seat opposite to him at the table, she seemed content to watch him scarf down his food. You act like I haven't done it before, Naruto muttered after washing a mouthful of eggs and bacon with orange juice. You've also never behaved like a delinquent before, Kushina countered, taking a composed sip of her own juice. I skipped class once and somehow I am a delinquent? Naruto questioned. That's how it starts, Kushina said following a hum. You also snuck out with Miles. Next you'll be sneaking out to meet with girls. If I am not careful, you'll make me a grandma far too soon. Not that I don't want at least 7 grandbabies, but you have to wait until I am at least. Mom. Naruto shut his eyes and pinched his temples, feeling a slight migraine coming on. I get it. I'll go to school. Just stop, please. After eating considerably more than he was used to, Naruto began his walk to school, taken with no particular purpose. Snow blanketed the streets in sections untouched by the flow of traffic, vehicular or human. It was a rare sight that only lasted as long as the worn yellow cab allowed as it puttered down the street. It would seem he wasn't the only one who thought to stay home. He just wasn't allowed to, so he continued on that cold and dour morning. Naruto was not above planting his face in his phone, though he made sure to walk with it raised high enough in front of him to allow his peripherals to catch sight of any incoming danger. As he did so, he rolled through his short list of contacts, which sadly contained more takeout spots than actual friends. He decided to call Miles and his phone rang 3 times before he answered. Hey, Miles answered lowly, his voice sounding scratchy. Miles was as big a fan of Spider-Man as he was. There a reason you weren't at our dorm yesterday? Naruto asked, finding he had more trouble than usual to find the words he wanted to say. Miles was silent for a moment. I kinda had a fight with my old man. He found out we snuck out to meet Uncle Aaron and things just blew up. I wanted to take this chance to drop out of Vision, but my mom convinced me to go back. Yeah, my mom found out too. Naruto cringed, and Miles, I know we've been over this before, but I really think you should give Vision a shot. Hate to think of it this way, but you know it'll look good when it comes time to apply for colleges. I guess so, but Miles didn't sound convinced. I just don't feel like I belong. Yak now? He did. Come on Miles, you're smart. You know as well as I do you deserve to be at Vision, Naruto said, trying to encourage his friend. But I don't have any friends at Vision, Miles countered. Ouch, Naruto chuckled, pressing a hand to his chest, but the pang he felt then and there was very much real. He was just used to hiding it. That hurt, Miles, right in my achy breaky heart. Aw shit, I didn't mean it like that, Miles shouted. Naruto, we're cool man. You know what I meant. Naruto forced another laugh. Yeah, I am just messing with you, Miles. I know you miss your friends from your old school. I get it, I have friends from my old school I miss too. Friends who only talked to him when he initiated conversation, but he didn't like to think about that. Yeah, it sucks, Miles said after another stretch of silence. But yak now, just because you're going to Vision doesn't mean you can't still hang out with them. Naruto tried to reason and cheer his friend up. Come on man. You can't leave me alone with those stuck-up assholes. I mean, isn't it weird that even the nerds look down on us? Right. Miles agreed readily, as if he was greatly vindicated by his words. So, you coming back or not? Naruto asked. I already told you my mom talked me into coming back, Miles said slowly and with what sounded like a smile molding his words, but you know I got your back, man. Thanks Miles. Naruto's smile was real that time. You know I got your back too. Alright. Miles elongated the single word. This is getting awkward. I'll see you at school. See you then, Naruto agreed with a final chuckle. Just as he pocketed his phone, Naruto became incredibly alert. He stopped abruptly to observe his surroundings but didn't see or hear anything that would indicate immediate danger, and when he faced forward to continue his trek, he jumped at the appearance of the cute girl from the day before. He stared at her and she stared right back, her large auburn eyes regarding him with, oddly enough, mischief in them. This was despite the seeming image of innocence she presented by smiling sweetly at him with her hands clasped behind her back. Hello, she said, closing her eyes to wave at him. Hey, Naruto said, unknowingly waving back, you're just like me, aren't you? The girl seemed sure of whatever it was she was referring to. Shed opened her eyes once more, keeping him entrapped by her those large eyes. He could only guess as to what she was referring to. You mean like, Japanese? Because I am pretty sure I am like, 3/4 Japanese. You see my dad? No silly, she interrupted with a giggle. I mean, you're a spider girl too. Wait, what do you mean spider girl? I am a man. If anything, I'd be a Spider-Man, Naruto corrected, standing straight with his chest forward. That was before his posture deflated again, realizing a short moment later what had done. Do you usually reveal your secret identity so easily, or do you even keep it a secret? The girl asked as she tapped her finger on her cheek inquisitively. Gah. Naruto buried his hands in his hair. I wasn't supposed to say that. I didn't mean to say that. I mean, I am just kidding, haha. The girl only hummed in a way that clearly indicated he was being very stupid. Who are you anyway? Naruto asked in defeat. How did you know what I am? You're not very bright, are you? She asked with a tilt of her head before taking a step towards him. I just told you, you're like me. I could sense it, just like I did yesterday, though I admit, I wasn't entirely sure it was you I was sensing until now. You could sense me? Naruto took a cautious step back until his own senses flared to life again, this time much stronger. Again, in place of danger, there was another feeling, one almost of familiarity, like he knew who the girl was, but he just hadn't seen her in a long time. Just like with Gwen, Naruto's thought process finally concluded what his instincts were already aware of. I am guessing you're from another universe too, the girl continued, choosing not to answer his question. You must be considering this world's Spider-Man is gone. Come with me, Naruto said, grabbing the girl by her hand without fully considering what he was doing. It would seem he would be missing another day of school. Naruto brought the mysterious girl back to his apartment, where she immediately proceeded to make herself at home, going through his pantry in search of snacks. Sugar-free sugar cookies? She muttered as she looked at the package as though the mere sight offended her, and then to him as if were his fault. Is that even possible? I mean, isn't the whole point of sugar cookies the sugar? Ah, well, and what's with the flavored seltzer? She continued her diatribe. If you're going to flavor carbonated water, then why not commit and drink a real soda? My mom doesn't like anything with gumos, Naruto offered weakly. That isn't even, dude. Your pantry's filled with instant ramen. The girl motioned to the 3 shelves lined with various forms of noodles, both in cups and in packages. Besides, in my time we're over that dumb fad. I know, I've tried explaining that to my mom, but Naruto blinked a few times. Wait, what do you mean by your time? Oh right. The girl cleared her throat before abruptly jumping onto the kitchen table. My name is Peni Parker, and I am from New York in the year 3145. I was bitten by a radioactive spider that I know share a physic link with. He lives inside my father's robot and we're best friends forever. Parker. Naruto stared at the girl, unsure of how he was supposed to take what she had just said. Meanwhile, Peni was still standing on his table, one hand on her hip while the other was sending him a peace sign pressed to her temple in a pose had seen in many anime. After a loud silence, the girl dropped her pose and looked down at him. I know my presentation's a little lacking without my robot, but you seem to be stunned. A grin suddenly split her face, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. See something you like, maybe? That time it was Naruto who unnecessarily cleared his throat, feeling his face heat up immediately at the insinuation. No, I am actually just a little surprised because I was also bitten by a radioactive spider like 2 days ago, though I am from this universe. But, you You're not the only one I've met who isn't. Pena's smile fell away into intrigue. I am not. No, and please get off the table, you're gonna get it dirty. At this, Peni huffed but did as she was asked with crossed arms and a cute pout. Thanks, Naruto muttered and immediately wondered why he thanked her in the first place. One wasn't supposed to jump on another's kitchen table, the place where others ate, to begin with. Yesterday. Well no, the day before yesterday. I met a girl who was also bitten by a radioactive spider, who was also from another universe, and I am pretty sure I know what caused it. The whole multiverse thing, I mean. You do? Peni asked. Yeah, I am like 93.2% sure, Naruto muttered before recounting of the events leading up to his current predicament, something that didn't get any easier. I am sorry to hear that. Peni offered a genuine look of sympathy, but I am also gonna need your help getting home. I don't even know your name yet. Naruto Namikaze. He smiled at the girl, but don't worry, I'll make sure you get home too. The perpetual blush on the girl's cheeks seemed to darken ever so slightly at his words. Anyway, if you give me the flash drive and a computer, I should be able to rewrite the code, making sure that when you destroy the collider, I and this other spider girl sent back to our respective time, or universe. Right, Naruto was once more reminded Gwen would eventually have to return to her own world, leaving his. Yeah okay, if you think you can do it, we hadn't actually considered how we were supposed to return her beyond destroying the collider. Then I guess you're lucky you met me, Peni said with a smirk, snapping up the flash drive from his hand. Oh wow, this thing's an antique. Now, your computer? Naruto brought Peni up to his room, showing her his computer. Peni observed the room with a critical eye, making him nervous, before looking to his computer, scowling ever so slightly. What's this? She asked. My computer. Naruto was unsure of what to make of her. Something wrong? It's so old, Peni complained, lightly kicking the tower. Hey, I'll have you know that PC is the best money could buy. 3 years ago, Naruto said, feeling offended, crouching to hug his computer defensively. His mother worked hard for the few luxuries he was allowed. Well, I am sorry, but it just won't do, Peni said, crossing her arms. My robot can gut the flash drive and make the adjustments needed, but I need to connect him up to a real computer to make any real changes. Any idea where we could find a computer with a little more power than this thing? Yeah sure, but just so you know, this thing can run the latest Call to Duty at low settings making 60 frames, and medium to high at 30 and you really don't care, Naruto finished with a sigh. Oh, I am a gamer myself, Peni said, taking a falling seat on his bed, bouncing a few times. We're on like the 400th iteration, but I mostly play JRPGs. That's so cool. Hey, did they ever make a third Quarter Life? Naruto asked hopefully. You're so old. Peni rolled her eyes, and no they never did. Hey, I am only 15. Naruto retorted and remembered she was from the future and wondered if they shared the same universe. By the way, you said your last name was Parker, the same as Spider-Man. Does that mean that we're somehow related? Peni finished for him, rubbing her arm nervously. Yeah, I thought that too at first, that maybe he may have been my great-great-grandfather or something, but after doing some research, I found some names and dates related to major events that happened before this year are different from my universe. Oh, Naruto palmed the back of his head. I'd ask like what differences, but we probably don't have the time. As for the computer you need, I am wondering if Spider-Man might have some sort of supercomputer? Yak now. Like one to help him fight crime or something? Maybe he even has a cave, like Batman or something. You mean like a spider cave, huh? Peni asked with a small smile. It would stand to reason. I know I have one. Well, it's not so much a cave but a base of operations. I guess I kinda do refer to it as my girl cave, which I am never saying out loud again. Yak now what? Maybe Spider Cave isn't such a goofy name after all. Naruto cleared his throat unnecessarily, feeling his face grow warm. No, but it is a little on the nose, he admitted. Back to the point, considering this computer exists, do you know how we could possibly gain access to it? Peni asked. I might. Naruto pulled out his phone to call Gwen, only to stop short when he recalled what she said the day before. She was likely trying to get some sleep and he didn't want to bother her if he could avoid it. Beyond that, he needed to learn how to be more self-sufficient eventually because Gwen and Peni both had to return to their worlds. So, Peni pressed after a prolonged moment's consideration. Find my Aunt May first. Naruto recalled the words clearly, though his reluctance came in that he wasn't ready to protect anyone should the need arise. But time stood still for no one and had yet to make good on his word of protecting Spider-Man's family. The longer he wallowed in his reluctance, the more danger they would be in. "I know where we need to go," Naruto said. Finding where May Parker lived was easier than Naruto was comfortable with. Her name, along with that of Peter and Mary Jane Parker, were amongst the top search results, with the fourth being the street in which Peter Parker grew up and where his aunt still lived. Such public information proved to further concern him, as well as to motivate him to hasten his training, even if that meant swinging from the highest building to do so, though he sincerely hoped it didn't have to come to that so soon. "It's certainly homely," Peni observed. They stood amongst a crowd of Spider-Man supporters and members of the media, who all gathered around the entire block surrounding the humble home of May Parker. Much like with the funeral, there was a heavy police presence keeping them all at bay. "How are we supposed to get to May around with everyone around?" Naruto was more so thinking aloud. The gathering was more of a vigil with those who continued to grieve in attendance, but it was nonetheless an inconvenience to what they had to do. "Leave that to me," Peni announced just before taking hold of his hand this time around, pulling him a short distance from the quaint suburb to an alley between two apartment complexes. Once there, she produced what looked to be a transparent tablet from within her backpack. Before Naruto could question her on to how hiding in a dingy alley could possibly be any help, he felt his skin crawl seeing a spider do just that from behind her shoulder. "Spider!" he all but shouted while frantically pointing at the offending arachnid. "He's my friend, silly," Peni said with a smile as she nuzzled the spider pressed against her cheek affectionately. "It's also how I pilot my robot." Naruto was about to question her sanity considering her closeness to a spider of all things, but her few final words caught his greater interest. "Pilot? Wait, how big is your—" The ground rumbled ever so slightly, but Naruto felt it through his feet just as he heard the subtle crunch of crumbling brick. All of his senses warned him that the incoming unknown was descending on him from above. Acting further out of instinct, Naruto took Peni into his arms and jumped away just as something large dropped down behind him. He landed in a perfectly balanced crouch on a nearby fire escape handrail with the girl squirming in his arms. Despite penis pounding on his chest and the kicking of her feet, the narrow foothold the railing provided, and the relative height, none of that registered with Naruto as he stared down what could only be described as a mech. It wasn't massive per se, but it was large enough to house a person as apparent by the seat clearly visible at the mech's bulbous center. "That's a freaking mech." Naruto's voice came out higher than it had been in 4 years, and it was yet another thing he only idly acknowledged. "A mech? You pilot a mech?" "Duh," Peni huffed. She seemed to have finally given up on escaping, instead crossing her arms, blowing a strand of hair that drooped over her left eye. "That's so cool," Naruto gushed as he dropped down, earning a cute squeak from the girl upon their easy landing. He set Peni down and began to closely inspect the mech. "His name is SP, Doctor, spelled with 2 forward slashes, by the way." Peni continued to look annoyed in her explanation. "My spider friend and I co-pilot it together." "Why?" Naruto asked as he continued to take in the fact he was standing before a fully functional mech. It was at least 12 to 15 feet tall in a semi-crouched position, with 2 long mechanical arms that ended in 3 claw-like appendages, along with a similar pair of supporting legs and feet. Its hull was circular in construct and primarily colored in both red and blue. Upon approaching the mech, its bulbous viewport darkened to display a pair of emotive LED eyes that seemed to follow him as rounded it, illuminating the dark alley in a vicious red glow. Well, piloting the mech alone would be too much for the human brain to handle, even one as super awesome as mine. Peni began her explanation. "That's why I—" "No, I mean why is it spelled like that?" Naruto asked, looking over to her. "Do we just give up on proper grammar in the future?" "Well, partially, but no, that's not why," Peni deadpanned before shaking her head. "Just get in, pretty boy." Pretty boy?" Naruto blushed at the sudden compliment, even if wasn't necessarily meant to be. "Me?" Pretty was one thing Naruto never considered himself to be. He liked to believe he was of average looks, but if anything, he would have liked to have been considered handsome over being pretty, though a compliment on his looks was in fact a compliment, especially coming from a cute girl like Peni, and it ranked among one of the few he'd ever received. Not counting his mother, Naruto shook his head to dispel the notion. No, Peni was certainly cute, but she was also a year younger than he and he liked Gwen, and just like with Gwen, They were both from another place. It wouldn't do him well to hope for anything. Well, are you getting in or not? Peni pressed. Geez. You sure do blank out a lot, and when you do, not a single thought goes through that smooth brain of yours. Huh? I guess you really are a blonde. One thing was certain, and that was he would never understand girls and their cryptic cues. One moment she complimented him and the next she did the opposite. Whatever her reasons, Naruto decided to ignore it for the time being. And how am I supposed to? The mech lurched forward abruptly. One of its clawed hands latched onto the neck of his uniform, picking him up kicking and screaming, bringing him towards its now open port as if it were about to swallow him. Naruto shut his eyes, feeling something powerful surge out from deep within him. A feeling he latched onto by forcing it out as hard as he could. He was dropped, falling to the ground with a dull thump, feeling a wave of exhaustion and faint nausea briefly overcome him. That was weird, he muttered, finally opening his eyes to find Peni was regarding him, a mixture of awe and confusion. What was that? Peni asked in just above a whisper. What was what? And why did your mech just try and eat me? Naruto asked as he stood on tingling feet, the feeling extending to his hands. It was an odd sensation, much like standing after one's legs fell asleep from sitting too long. You're the one who just shocked my SP, drive. Penis awe-inspired expression became accusatory, with a pointed finger for added effect. You just produced an electric field. You didn't say you could do that. Also, I told you his name, so say it right, you jerk. Right, Spider. Naruto resisted the urge to roll his eyes, stayed only by his curiosity at what she just said. I did what now? You said it wrong. Peni accused him, her eyes narrowing. His name is SP, Doctor, and you called him Spider. If you're gonna shock him, then at least get his name right. What? Naruto didn't understand exactly what he was being accused of, but that's what I just said. No, you said Spider. His name is SP, drive. Peni repeated using a tone that indicated he was being dumb, and if she weren't speaking absolute nonsense to him. That's what I said, Spider. Naruto argued. No it's not, you just said Spider. I know, so then say it right. I just did. No you didn't. Wait, what are we even arguing about here? Naruto asked, feeling as though they were going in circles with no end in sight. How are you spelling SP, Doctor, when you say it? Peni asked, further confusing him. I am not, because nobody thinks about that when they speak, Naruto muttered. I am just saying Spider. Spell it out in your head before you say it, Peni demanded. Do it or I won't forgive you. Forgive me for what? Naruto was growing increasingly annoyed by her spontaneity. For shocking my SP, Doctor. Now do it, Peni said. Fine, Naruto snapped, rolling his eyes at what he was being asked to do. SP, drive. Peni smiled brightly at him. Good boy, that wasn't so hard then, was it? I literally said it the same way. Naruto snapped. He took a moment to compose himself so as not to get back into a never-ending argument with her. Can we please talk about what you just said? About me shocking your SP, drive. Do you seriously not know all your powers yet? Peni appeared genuinely confused by this, because you kinda just exploded with electricity, short-circuited SP, Doctor enough to drop you, and he's pretty well equipped for things like that. I just kinda assumed they were the same as Spider-Man's, and even Gwen's. Naruto wondered what set him apart from the aforementioned, yak now, super strength, agility, heightened reflexes and all that. Interesting and totally unfair. Say, mind if I poke and prod you? You know, so we can know for what powers you have. Penis eyes were brimming with excitement, and behind her, SPDR's hand became a glinting circular blade that was spinning menacingly with an evil emote to match. Naruto laughed nervously, hoping dearly she was only joking. You're a little scary, he finished, taking a cautious step back. I call it scientific curiosity. Peni grinned at him. Now if you don't mind, we need to get going, so please don't shock my SP, Doctor, again. Then don't order it to eat me. Naruto rebutted. He wasn't going to eat you, dummy. I told you to get inside because we're gonna use SP, Doctor, to sneak past all those people, Peni explained. Naruto looked from the short girl to the large mech. That thing is supposed to get us past a crowd of people. How? My mech's got a number of stealth features you'll just have to see for yourself, Peni smirked. Well, that explains that, but how are we both supposed to fit in there? Naruto asked, pointing to the only operator's seat in the relatively small compartment. Oh, it seemed Peni herself had yet to consider that, her cheeks darkening slightly. I guess we could come back when it's dark. Yeah, that would make more. Peni let out a shout of pain and began to glitch, much like Gwen had before. Peni. Naruto caught her before she fell, managing to keep his hold on her. Are you okay? That's the second time this happened. Peni groaned. It hurts, Naruto. I need to get you home. Naruto helped stabilize Peni and moved towards SP, Doctor, who somehow appeared concerned, but to do that, we need to find May Parker. Never before had Naruto ever felt so awkward as he did in that moment, cramped in the mech with Peni seated on his lap as she piloted. The girl herself seemed altogether unbothered by the situation as she bobbed her head to the beat of the loud music and snacked on some popcorn she somehow made. The interior of the mech could only be considered futuristic. They were bathed in a dim red hue and there was no solid controls in sight. The interface was all holographic, controlled masterfully by Peni as though it was second nature, at times only with a single hand as the other was occupied by popcorn or a soda he was made to hold when she was not drinking. The view of the streets from within was interesting. Naruto may or may not have screamed initially as SP, Doctor deftly ascended the side of a building, and then down again, entering the New York sewer system. It was a surreal experience for certain, but it was second to the fact he had a cute girl in his lap. Speaking of said girl, Naruto didn't ever think he'd find anyone as cool as Gwen, but that was until he met Peni. With that, a festering feeling of inadequacy as a fellow radioactive bite recipient, when compared to both girls, and even Spider-Man himself, he felt wholly unprepared. We should be beneath the neighborhood now, Peni announced as, with a flick of her wrist, she expanded a map of the neighborhood for him to see. A pink variation of Spider-Man's logo acting as their location indicator, she shot him a smirk from over her shoulder. You ready? My legs are getting kinda numb, Naruto said in response. With a pout, Peni returned to her piloting. SP, Doctor lifted the sewer cover, using its mechanical hand as a periscope. The heads-up display showing a view of the street and the crowd. They were in an alleyway just behind May Parker's home, with police on both ends blocking off access on both ends. No one's looking, but I can momentarily cloak my SP, Doctor, refracting light to blend in with the surroundings. As long as we move slowly, no one should notice, Peni explained. Have I ever told you how cool you are? Naruto thought aloud. This feels like I am in a video game, or an anime. Peni chuckled lightly with something of a smug smile. No, but feel free to keep praising me. Before Naruto could respond, Peni maneuvered SP, Doctor into the open. A notification appeared on the display, indicating to them they were currently cloaked. They slowly moved closer to the Parker home's fence, climbing over it near an old beige shed. I am gonna leave SP, Doctor here, cloaked. We should be able to get close now, Peni said. The rest is up to you. Got it, Naruto acknowledged. With a snap and a prompt hiss, SP-DRS viewport opened up and Peni jumped out with Naruto following closely behind her. They made sure to stick close to the old privacy fence, the boards shrunken from years in the sun. Do you know what you are going to tell her? Peni asked in a whisper. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He had no inclination of how he was supposed to approach May and tell her he watched her nephew die, that he was too powerless, despite having the power, to help him in his time of need. Naruto? Peni turned back to look at him with worry evident in her face. I don't know, Naruto admitted, standing to his full height. Hey, what are you doing? Get down, Peni called out after him. But Naruto ignored her as he walked up to the back door and knocked. In the moments following that, all he could hear was the distant chatter of the mourners, some even coming together to hum Spider-Man's theme song. Naruto couldn't help but smile at the sound. The door opened to reveal a kind, yet warm-looking older woman he recognized to be May Parker herself. It was apparent she had been crying recently, if her reddened eyes were of any indication, and despite this and his trespassing, she offered him a kind smile. I realize you miss Spider-Man, and though I do appreciate your condolences, I am going to have to ask you to please leave. You were trespassing, May said, her voice equally as kind. I knew Spider-Man, Naruto began. Directionless, I know, young man. Everyone did, May acknowledged, her smile growing ever so slightly. No. Naruto shook his head and found he could no longer hold her eyes, instead looking to his shoes. No, I mean I was there when it happened. I know who did it and I have to stop him, but to do that, I am gonna need your help. You know who killed my husband? I end the story here.